for the chance to score a fantastic 4-day trip for two to the city by the bay, San Francisco, including tickets to Super Bowl 60 and $2.5 grand in cold hard cash. It's Hail Marys and money. Enter now at talk.tv/win and get set for a gilt-edged trip to the Golden State you'll never forget. For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate, or call 0343-418-7260. Lines close 22nd January 2026, 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus, UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at TalkSport.com. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
6, top of the morning to you. I'm Mark Dolan. This is Talk Breakfast. And is this the beginning of the end of the Conservative Party as we know it? As their most high-profile defection takes place, we will bring you full reaction to the decision by former Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick. What does it mean for the Tories? What does it mean for reform? And what does it mean for British democracy? And a question to you this morning as you wake up, as you get the kettle on, as you get ready for another big day. Is it the duty of all true Conservatives to back reform? My phone number is 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK and your message to 87222. Leave us a voice note. Are Reform UK the true Conservatives? And is it the duty of anybody that's on the right that wants to get rid of wokery in our public institutions, that wants to end the madness of net zero, that wants to close the border, that wants to reduce taxes and grow the economy? Is it their duty to back Reform UK? Is Nigel Farage now the only option? Meanwhile, Donald Trump receives the Nobel Peace Prize, gifted to him from the current holder. But has he let down the people of Iran with no further action as an autocratic, theocratic regime kills its own people? Meanwhile, the West Midlands police chief clings to his job amid an ongoing anti-Semitism row. What does it tell us about the two-tier nature of British policing that this man is still in post? Meanwhile, Labour cancel elections, and it is revealed that mental health is the most common reason that children are now homeschooled. Is it time for our youngsters to toughen up a bit? Do you think the first thing we should be teaching our kids, Christian Mitchell, the executive producer of this show, is that life is tough? Drink it up, folks. It ain't easy. But what do you think about this? I want to get your opinions on the radio and on the telly. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Leave us a voice note. And as the saying goes, let's talk. Dolan's dispatch at 9 a.m. I'll be giving my first on-air verdict to the defection of Robert Jenrick and what it means for British politics. Let me tell you, it is seismic. It is huge. It is bigger than a big thing. But we've heard from Nigel, we've heard from Robert, from Bobby J. It's time now to hear from you. Is it the duty of all true Conservatives to back reform? 0344 499 1000. As the saying goes, let's talk. And we kick off, as always, at this time on Friday Breakfast with tomorrow's front pages. And the Sun newspaper, I think, win the headline of the day. Tories banished Jenrick in defection to Farage, sacked by Kemi after plot rumbled. Kemi Badenoch dramatically sacked Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick yesterday after unmasking him as a Tory traitor, of course, invoking the language there of the hit BBC show. You don't hear that in a sentence very often, do you? Hit BBC show. But The Traitors has got the people across the country watching, and I've got to say, it's got the world of Westminster talking as well. The Conservative boss banished her former leadership rival after discovering that he was secretly plotting to join Nigel Farage's Reform UK party. Hours later, Mr Jenrick announced his defection before launching a blistering tirade against his former colleagues. He said they are in denial about their party's failures and were not sorry and have not changed. Now, the question is, was this a good moment for Kemi Badenoch? Well, I will say that I think strategically she did very well. She got ahead of the curve on this one. She identified that Jenrick was on resignation watch, that he was on his way out of the party. She wasn't sure when. Now, it's my understanding that Jenrick was going to defect before the May elections, but he wasn't going to defect yesterday, he wasn't going to defect today, he wasn't going to defect next week or even next month. He was going to do it prior to the May elections. And to a degree, Kemi has forced his hand. What I would suggest, though, even though it is strong leadership from Kemi to get him out of the party, and it may have spoiled the press conference to a degree, ultimately she is presiding, I would argue, over a sinking ship. Daily Mail, Westminster Day of Drama. Britain's economy is moribund. Our borders are broken. Our armed forces badly depleted in a world of peril. And our PM is an ocean-going socialist dud. As Jenrick's defection rocks the right, the Daily Mail's message to Reform and the Tories: stop fighting each other and end the Labour nightmare. Now, I beg to differ with the Daily Mail on this one, because I think the Tories are toast. I don't think that Reform are going to need their support at the next general election. They're already statistically so far ahead in the polls that they'll form an overall majority, and that's before you take into account the shy Reform voters. Because are you telling me that a common sense member of the public walking down the street, when grabbed by one of those, you know, the people that do the political polls, and it's normally a woke 17-year-old in a hoodie, and they say, who will you be voting for? Do you support Reform? You go, oh, no, not at all. I'm a very good person. I'm very moral and upstanding. And Nigel Farage is a horrible ruffian, and he was a right toe rag when he was 17 in the school playground. People will not say that they're backing Reform. So I would argue that where they are in the polls is an underestimation of their commanding position. I don't think they need the Tories anymore. And I say that with a heavy heart, because the Tories are the party of Winston Churchill and Margaret Thatcher, the two greatest figures of the 20th century. Churchill, who faced down fascism and defeated Hitler, and Mrs. Thatcher, who rescued Britain from being the sick man of Europe to a global economic, diplomatic and military powerhouse. Thatcher was an icon, and Churchill was an icon, and yet the legacy of both of those individuals has been abandoned by a woke, incredibly left-wing Conservative Party. Don't take my word for it. They signed up for net zero, which is socialism in a green rosette. They allowed wokery in our public institutions to take hold, with the NHS talking about chest feeders and birthing humans. That didn't happen under Keir Starmer. Do you know something? At 10 minutes past 6 in the morning, Christian, we're actually, can I just say this now and cancel me, OK? Sam, engineer, right, clip this. We are too hard on Keir Starmer, actually. Yes, we are. We are too hard. I don't like him. Of course not. He's not a politician. He's the human manifestation of ChatGPT software gone horribly wrong. He's a robot. He's an android. He's dishonest. He's incompetent. I don't like Keir Starmer, but we are too hard on him. Because ultimately, why is the country completely ruined? Because of a COVID overreaction. What a nasty virus it was. It took too many. But it was non-fatal to absolutely almost everyone. And yet we bankrupted the economy to stop a virus, right? Boris folded to the lefty scientists. Net zero, that was signed up to by Theresa May, who was told by her Chancellor this will cost $1 trillion, Prime Minister, and a Conservative Prime Minister signed up for a experimental project based on flaky renewables at a cost of £1 trillion, and by the way, and the rest, under the Conservatives. So it's understandable why this has happened. I don't think, let me know what you think, I don't think that Reform need the Tories. I love the Daily Mail. It's the most read English language newspaper in the world. They don't get much wrong, but they're wrong on this one. Robert Jenrick threw a hand grenade into the political right yesterday as he defected to Reform just hours after being outed as a Tory turncoat. On a dramatic day at Westminster, the former Tory leadership contender became the highest profile defector to Nigel Farage's insurgent party. But what the Mail is saying is that the Tories and Reform shouldn't fight. Well, I agree with Lord David Frost, former chief Brexit negotiator. He's the guy that really got Brexit done, not Boris. And he's a good friend of mine. He was in the studio just a few weeks ago. We'll get him back soon. He said, actually, no, there is no deal. There is no continuity solution where those parties can co-govern. He said it's a fight to the death now. And I've got to tell you that I think it's a fight that Reform UK are going to win. We are to, look, Starmer has accelerated our decline. I hear you, but all of the fundamental changes of this country, the open borders, the net zero, the wokery in our public institutions, the depleted military, the high tax burden, the culture of welfarism, this was all incubated under 14 years of Tory rule, and it's a legacy that Starmer has inherited. And yes, he's accelerated it. He's put a tiger in the tank in terms of our national decline. But the architects of where we are today, it isn't Keir Starmer. It is David Cameron. It is Theresa May. Poor old Liz Truss, she had 44 days. She tried to do the right thing. She didn't do it well. But by God, I'd swap Keir Starmer for Liz Truss this morning at 13 minutes past 6. The Daily Telegraph. Jenrick, Tories broke Britain. Shadow Justice Secretary defects to Reform after being sacked by Badenoch. He attacks former colleagues and says they don't have the stomach for change. Farage hails realignment of centre-right and claims we are on the same page. Let's listen to Bobby J. Robert Jenrick, the most talked about politician in the country yesterday. Nigel won't have liked that. Take it away, Sam. Do your worst.
Both Labour and the Conservatives broke Britain, and both are now dominated by those without the competence or the backbone needed to fix it. Both parties, if judged by their own actions, are committed to a set of ideas that have failed and are failing Britain. Labour started mass migration, but the Conservatives ramped it up. After 2019, the Conservatives almost left us without a border. 5 million came, 3/4 not to work. When I was Minister for Immigration in late 2022, I fought colossal fights for reductions in legal migration alongside Suella Braverman.
Powerful stuff. What did you make of Jenrick's speech yesterday? Do Reform need the support of the Tories anymore? Is it the duty of all true Conservatives to back Reform UK? More front pages and my special star guest next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Is it the duty of all true Conservatives to back Reform UK? This is a voice note from Mike. Take it away, Mike.
Well, Mark, let me get in first. I'm going to do a Kemi here, even though I'm not a massive fan of her. No, I think Robert Jenrick has made a great move, and I don't think Kemi was ahead of the curve on this one. She must have known freehand, and if I had been a leader and known that, the even inkling of knowing that, I would have got rid sooner. I think this has been a massive, massive blow, and it's Reform all the way.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. First voice note of the day. Not impressed by Kemi in regard to this political drama. Steve says, good morning, Mark. Great show. Kemi won the battle, but ultimately lost the war. Jenrick is a game changer for Reform. Put all those questions about used up Tories, at least on the street. You certainly still hear it on TV, but for your average punter on the street, this is the win that Reform needed. Martin says, good morning, Mark. Reform represents a bold reset for Britain, and Robert Jenrick's decision to join the party signals a demand for real change. Many supporters argue, as do I, that Reform offers the only credible path to stability, security and national success, making his move both timely and significant. The Tories are a spent force. That's Martin in Cornwall. Absolutely, says Nadia, the Tories got us to exactly where we are. Agree with you on that, Mark. Tony says, good morning, Mark. Latest electoral calculus poll is devastating for the Uni Party. Reform UK have led the past 200 opinion polls consecutively. What's in a name, says another texter. Farage is not the man that Maggie was, but maybe Robert can teach him. And Rachel says, good morning, Mark. I am waking up with hope this morning. I'm over the moon that Jenrick has joined Reform. His speech yesterday was inspiring. Reform will form the next government. End of, says Rachel. Let's have a listen to Robert Jenrick talking about how Labour and the Tories broke Britain.
I reached out to Nigel in September. I could see then the Conservative Party wasn't changing, couldn't fix Britain. I didn't know that I was going to defect. In fact, we didn't discuss that. I just knew the responsible thing to do, the honest thing to do for me, was to explore all options. From the conversations that we've had since, quietly, and from what I've seen Nigel and Richard and Zia and Lee and Danny and Sarah say and do publicly, I am convinced that Nigel and Reform will deliver the real change we need. Nigel knows, Reform knows, the extraordinary challenges that Britain faces require a comprehensive plan to turn our country around. That'll be a major priority for this year. As Nigel has said, we will set out to build and recruit the team needed to execute that plan.
Good morning, Mark, says Julia in Mansfield. I think that Robert Jenrick is a great asset to the Reform Party. There's nothing wrong with switching sides. I've done it. I was a Conservative voter until several years ago. Now I'm a Reform member, but I must add, I've never voted Labour, even though my husband was a coal miner. Pete says the only real traitors are those in government, with the traitor-in-chief resident at 10 Downing Street as we speak. Folks, it is exactly 22 minutes past 6. Dolan's dispatch coming later. We've also got, by the way, some Tory luminaries on the show. Is it the beginning of the end of their party? Mark Francois, one of the founding fathers of Brexit, and former Lord Chancellor and Justice Secretary Sir Robert Buckland joining us live on the show later. And somebody that defected from Reform UK from the Tories to Reform UK, Anne Widdecombe joins us, but live in the studio now. I'm delighted to welcome broadcaster and journalist, the brilliant Benedict Spence. Good morning, Benedict.
Good morning.
Who was the winner yesterday after all this political drama?
Genuinely, I think both. I think both the Tories and Reform. And, I hear a lot of, what your audience is saying about how this is sort of the death of the Conservative Party and a fantastic victory for Reform. I think it is a victory for Reform, but what this does is, very clearly, it takes away, we'll start with the Conservative Party, it takes away Kemi Badenoch's chief rival. She now has no other rivals. That unbelievably will give the party, or should give the party, a semblance of stability. Now, a lot of voters are not particularly wowed by the Conservative Party. This is not me but saying that things are now going to get really good for the party, but that has been the thing that's been hanging over them for, well, basically ever since Kemi Badenoch became leader, was the question of when's there going to be the leadership contest? When's it inevitably going to happen? Well, now we're sat here going, well, when is it going to happen? Who is there who's better than Kemi Badenoch? Up until now, lots of people, perhaps justifiably, have been saying Jenrick's good, he's got, good on messaging, he seems to be across all the hot topics, he seems able to park his tanks on Reform's lawn, that therefore he would be a good option. But that creates instability. That's now gone, which means that the Conservatives now have to fight on Kemi's terms, so to speak. Those battle lines have been drawn. It gives them that stability, and she has been very slowly creeping up in the polls, because as she's found her feet, she has been getting better at this. Now, that's not going to win over a lot of people who've already left the Conservative Party, but it gives them the opportunity, if you like, to stem the bleeding and to slowly start the rebuild. Kemi Badenoch is never going to be Prime Minister, but I do think she'll lead them into the next general election. It allows the party to survive. And that, I think, given where we were 6 months ago, 12 months ago, many people thought the party was completely dead. I think they have to take that as a positive. For Reform, it gives them a big figure. It gives them, as I said, somebody who is very good at messaging all across the hot topics. And on top of that, because I do think we can overestimate how much resonance this has with the general public, the average person in the street still doesn't actually know who Robert Jenrick is, but it gives Reform now something that they didn't have, which is a succession plan. Up until now, every time you look at Reform, you think, yeah, it's doing very well in the polls, it seems to be attracting lots of support, but is it still the Nigel Farage show? Without him, what is there? Well, now there is a second in command, even though he's saying he's not doing it for personal ambition. There is a person actually that you can turn to and say, if Nigel Farage turns around one day and goes, I've had enough, I'm exhausted, I've been leading this campaign for however many decades now, there is somebody that party can credibly turn around to, who is not divisive among the membership, and say, that's the future.
Oh, do you see Jenrick as the sort of unspoken number two of the Reform project now?
I think absolutely he has to be. I mean, put it this way, we're sort of thinking about...
How do you think big Richard Tice and Zia Youssef will feel about that?
Richard Tice was the one who was most keen for Farage to come back. Richard Tice was the one who understood the need to have that sort of big figurehead, because as much as anything else, if you're Richard Tice and you've done a lot of the groundwork in sort of getting Reform off the ground in the aftermath of the Brexit Party, being good at politics is understanding, actually, that you yourself may not be the person that wants to be at the top table. Ultimately, I think that we've seen that through several sort of Conservative government iterations. Sometimes the most influential person is not the one with their name, sort of, so to speak, on the storefront. That's just the person that leads, and a lot can be done behind the scenes. Youssef, again, is getting an awful lot done, not as the man who has to go out all the time as the leader, but as the person who makes things work behind the scenes. Now, maybe, in a couple of years' time, Richard Tice might change his mind. Maybe Zia Youssef might change his mind. Maybe somebody else will emerge from Reform UK and go, actually, no, I fancy being leader. But right now, let's say for some reason Farage turned around today and said, I don't want to lead this party anymore. Richard Tice would not carry the same amount of heft, the same amount of recognition as Jenrick does, and neither would Zia Youssef. So that gives them an alternative that allows the party to keep going at that similar kind of level. Because otherwise, as good as both of those guys are, and I like them, they're both very talented people, but they're not Farage, and frankly, they're not Robert Jenrick either.
Kemi Badenoch pushed Robert Jenrick before he jumped. She got wind of his planned defection, which I think we can all agree wasn't going to happen this week or next week or even likely next month. It was going to happen pre-May the 7th.
Yeah.
So clearly she's rumbled that plan, but in the process, therefore, this defection has been a lot noisier and received many more column inches. So has it backfired for Kemi?
I don't think it's backfired for Kemi particularly, because
she's made it a bigger story, hasn't she?
Well, it would have been a much worse story if Jenrick had done it without her knowing, on his terms at the moment of maximum damage. This does allow her, I suppose, to just get it out of the way early, get it out of the way, get it gone. Now she's able to try and picture Jenrick not as somebody who, you know, had finally sort of, it had snapped, and, you know, they were heading into the election, and he thought that the local election, and things weren't going very well. He's not then able to turn around and say, oh, well, I was trying my very hardest. He did say all of these things, of course, yesterday in his press conference with Farage, but it doesn't quite hit home in the same way, because we all know, well, we're still a good 3 or 4 months away from when he was planning on doing it. He'd already written his letter, he'd already written his speech, he'd already prepared for it. He was going through the motions, and that way we know he would have very happily sat there for however many months, just going along with it, but not actually being as part of the party. So I think that slightly takes the shine off him in the short term. Long term, it's not going to do any damage to his career. He'll be absolutely fine. But it does, I think, show that Kemi is able to just slightly be, you know, get out ahead of these things, be decisive when she needs to be, and as I said as well, it gets rid of her biggest rival. Now, let's be clear though, everything is on her. She lives or dies by that, and also so does the party. There is no Robert Jenrick-shaped plan B for them now.
Let's get reaction from Perry and a voice note.
Morning, Mark. I'm very, very happy that he's jumped over to Reform. And this goes to show that the Conservatives have not changed one bit. It's all mouth and all the front. And Kemi Badenoch said one thing yesterday that made me think they haven't changed. And what she said was, he is now Reform's problem. So what problem was he? Was it the fact he was going to France and pointing out immigration? Was it the fact he was going to car boot sales and say that crime's going up, finding all these stolen tools? Was it a problem that he was going to train stations and watching people jump the barriers? So what was the problem? Why has she said he's now their problem? They obviously didn't like him pointing out that crime, immigration is out of control, which to me shows they have not changed in the slightest, because him pointing all that out was upsetting them. Well done, Reform.
Brilliant voice note. Thank you for that, Perry. Is it the duty of all true Conservatives to now back Reform UK? And here's a question for you at exactly 6:30 in the morning on a Friday. Will Suella be next? This is Talk Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk Breakfast. It is 6:32. The Times newspaper. Jenrick defects to Reform after sacking by Badenoch, and cost of a big family drives abortions to record high. The Guardian. Sacked Jenrick defects to Reform with fiery attack on failed Tories, and Middle East allies urged Trump not to strike Iran. Daily Star. Money for old dope. Greedy Nigel's video nasty. Farage duped into pedo tributes. Nigel Farage was pranked into paying tribute to dead Lost Profits pedo Ian Watkins on video messaging site Cameo, being paid around £75 a time. The way that works, Cameo is a website where you can ask a celebrity to do a message for you, a friend or a family member. And someone has sent Nigel a message saying, please, wish Ian Watkins a happy birthday. I don't think that's the gotcha that the Daily Star think it is. The I newspaper, Day of Poison and Betrayal as UK's right-wing feud deepens. Tory leader sacks and exiles her rival Robert Jenrick before he defects to Reform as star signing. Daily Mirror, would you trust any of them? Farage's party of Tory failures. Badenoch sacks Jenrick after betrayal leak. Then he joins the man who called him a fraud. And Daily Express, Jenrick joins Reform with blast at rotten Tories. But Kemi defiant over sacking, saying bad people are leaving my party. Now, Maggie has messaged the show. Good morning, Maggie. She says, Mark, I thought that Jenrick's speech was from the heart yesterday. No script, no teleprompter, no keeping looking down every 5 seconds. Yes, he came across as a real Tory. Glad to have him in the Reform Party. Well, here's a question for you, Benedict Spence, broadcaster and journalist. Is it now the duty of all true Conservatives to back Reform?
Not necessarily. It depends what the constituency is. Depends also who the MP is. And this is something that actually I would always say to people when deciding who it is that they're going to vote for at a general election, because very frequently people do just vote for the party or the prime ministerial candidate. But one of the sad things actually about the necessary battering that the Conservatives took at the last election, and it was necessary, is that a lot of local Tory MPs who really had not very much to do at all with the disaster that had been going on in government, but who'd worked for many cases for decades in their lives to improve their local constituencies, because that is what is at the heart of being a Conservative. Many of them lost their seats at the last election. So, you don't necessarily have to back Reform. Right now, they certainly look like the strongest horse in town. We're still a long way away from the next general election, and I'm slightly curious as to what's going to happen. I think that there's going to be a lot of horse trading on the left. I think that there is going to be a lot of tactical voting on the left. And I do think that is a viable way for Starmer, genuinely, if he is still Prime Minister, but whoever is leading Labour at that point, to remain in power, possibly as part of a coalition, which this country cannot afford. I think, therefore, even though there is no love lost between Reform and the Conservatives, as we get closer to that point, there could yet, and for a long time I did think that this would never happen, but the needs of the nation might trump that. There will need to be more tactical voting on the side on the right as well, and that will mean some people voting Reform. It will also mean some people having to hold their nose if they are Reform voters and vote Conservative in areas where, if they don't vote for the Conservatives, they're going to be letting Labour, say, or a Green or a Lib Dem in. And I think that people on the right need to be, dare I say it, a lot less Corbynista, a lot less Puritan about this sort of thing. They need to obviously stick with the party that they want, first and foremost, but if we get to that position where in a couple of years' time it looks like we could have a left-wing coalition in this country, for heaven's sake, look at who the most likely person is in that seat on the right and back that person if we get to that point.
Do the defections from the Conservative Party dilute the potency of the Reform brand?
Yes, I think they do. I think Jenrick is an exception to that. I think he strengthens it. If it hadn't been for a lot of the other defections, I would have thought Nadim Zahawi might as well, because he's also a very good talker, very good communicator. He does not have the cleanest, squeakiest record, let's be clear, but he is not an incompetent person. But when you sort of set him against the backdrop of a lot of the other people who are very clearly leaving the sinking ship in order to basically have a political career, well, then it doesn't look so good. And, the reasoning that Nigel Farage was giving yesterday, which is that you do need people with experience of frontline politics if you're going to get in. You don't want to be like the Five Star Movement and get into Parliament and have no idea what you're doing. That's true. But on the flip side, is it the likes of Andrea Jenkins and Nadine Dorris and Jake Berry et al.? Are they really the ones that actually people are going to sit there and go, ah, yes, magnificent, experience of government? No. People like Jenrick, yes. Zahawi, whatever you might think of his background, Also, yes, he does have a lot of experience of ministerial roles, high-profile ministerial roles. But broadly speaking, they need to be very, very conscious of just how many Tories are coming over to them and which ones they decide to go forward with and which ones, frankly, they kick to the curb.
Will Suella be next?
I see no reason now why she would stay in the Conservative Party. I think right now, whilst Jenrick was still in the Conservative Party and he offered that plan B in the event of a leadership contest and Kemi being got rid of, there was a future for Suella Braverman there. There isn't any more. I don't see actually what she's holding on to, if not just out of loyalty, which I suppose many of us could respect up to a point, but right now, clearly, ideologically, her home is with the Reform Party.
Sarah says, I'm a Conservative Party member. I'm glad that Jenrick has gone. He would have caused a lot of problems for Kemi after they hopefully win the election if Labour don't cancel it. Good point. However, I think he's a naive fool, as Jenrick only held his seat by a relatively small majority. He may well regret his decision. That is Sarah in Plymouth. Thank you for that, Sarah. Good morning, Mark. Phil in Coventry. I disagree with your earlier caller. People do know who Robert Jenrick is. He speaks our language. He sees the same things that we see on the streets. He knows what we, the British people, want. I've been praying for this day. I think it makes Reform the party for the British people. Yesterday was a great day. Neil says, Mark, it'll be interesting to observe the clash of egos in Reform with Farage, Tice, Yousaf, Bull and now Jenrick, all under the same roof. I think we can expect fireworks. And Martin in Lichfield. Good morning, Martin. How are you? Thank you for listening to Talk Breakfast at 6:38 in the morning, 6:39 now. Martin says, good morning, Mark. I think this is a massive tick in the box for Reform on a national level. At least Jenrick has a passionate political position and was not afraid of criticising the Tories and calling out the wokery of Westminster. Words mean nothing without sincerity. Reform needs experience and integrity. Kemi might be giving some good speeches, but she won't be able to do anything, even if she wanted to, because of the Lib Dem influence from the coalition days. That's my 2 bobs worth. Well, Martin, worth more than 2 bob, I would say. Here's a question for you at 6:39 in the morning. Who is the Labour defection going to be? Could it be this man, Carl Turner, Labour backbencher, not happy with the Prime Minister? Take a listen.
Well, look, there's no wonder Labour MPs are cheesed off. I've spoken to the Prime Minister privately and I've said to him, stop marching up the hill to march us back down again on policy positions which we know inevitably are not going to fit. The juries is a great example. It is unworkable.
Who do you think the Labour defection will be, Benedict?
Genuinely, I don't know. I think Carl Turner is an interesting shout. I do wonder whether or not he might consider that slightly sort of undermining his own message, of course, because what he's doing is all about his opposition to the scrapping of jury trials at the moment. You know, that's why he's kicking up a fuss, because he's taking a very principled ideological position on something that, admittedly, I think a lot of Reform voters really would agree with him on this, but ultimately so would a lot of Labour voters. And I do wonder if actually joining an entirely new right-wing, predominantly right-wing party would be the step for somebody who ultimately has only stepped back from Labour because of this one issue. It wouldn't be the most shocking thing, but I don't think it's going to be likely. I think it's probably not going to be a sitting MP. If it were, though, I think that would be I think actually that would be as significant as Robert Jenrick, a leading Tory joining Reform. Any sitting Labour MP joining them, I think, is a real sign of discomfort on the left.
And it's interesting, the language of Nigel Farage yesterday, he talked about Reform as a centre-right political movement. Was that significant?
It is, because that is ultimately what they're trying to be. They're not trying to be...
But isn't that what the Tories are? And is that not what our viewers and listeners want, given the fact that the country needs a social, political, cultural and economic revolution?
Well, I mean, there are many different kinds of right-wing. Ultimately, you can have free marketers, you can have more sort of, less sort of open attitude towards global markets and that sort of thing. You can have ultimately something that is more neoliberal, if you wish. You can have a sort of a more old-fashioned Conservative Party. Ultimately, that was where the Conservatives went wrong. They tried that expression, we're a broad church, we're everything, and you kind of go, yeah, but in the end that doesn't really work, because then you will start fighting each other. Reform... Here's the tricky thing, because of course we've often been told in this country elections are won from the centre. You have to be sort of occupying the centre, you have to be sort of centrist, otherwise nobody will vote for you. We're going to be testing that theory at the next general election, because Labour are veering very firmly to the left. The Greens are very, very firmly to the left. You'd have to say, therefore, that the Lib Dems are the sort of the centre-left. Are their polling numbers going gangbusters? Absolutely not. The Tories are occupying that sort of centre-right ground. Their polling is doing better than it was, but it's not great. Reform actually are polling very highly, but people don't perceive them as being a centrist party, actually. They see them as being very firmly on the right. So actually, I wonder whether or not that's true. I understand why Farage is doing that. He's trying not to scare the horses, ultimately. But is that going to be the reality? I'm not sure yet.
What about this voice note from Sean on the defection of Robert Jenrick?
Morning, Mark. Sean from Grimsby here. I think Kevin was right to sack Robert Jenrick. There's a certain way that you have to do things, I believe, and I believe that Reform are going to need the help of the Tories in a couple of years to come. I just think that the politicians on the right have got a lot to answer for. They've spent years and years fighting each other, backstabbing, stabbing each other in the back. We see it yesterday, we see it with Rupert Lowe, we see it with Boris, we see it all the time. People on the right, this is why we never get anywhere and never get anything done. And I think that, you know, for Jenrick to spout on about Priti Patel, about this immigration from the boys, well, yeah, we know all this. Well, we don't need to be told every 5 minutes. How about let's concentrate on what we can do, right, and get things sorted, because nothing's getting sorted. It just seems to me that Westminster is just full of villainy. It really does, and rottenness. Anyway, great show.
Sean, thank you for that. Well, it sparks a very important question, which is quite a simple one. Does a civil war on the political right between Reform and the Tories gift Labour the next election? This is Talk Breakfast.
Breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
This is a Talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
6:46, it is Talk Breakfast. Lovely to have your company. Maggie says, good morning, Mark. Remind your guest Benedict, if the real Tories had been real Tories, we wouldn't be talking about reform. They caused and created reform. Well, Maggie, you could have written today's Dolan's Dispatch, because that's very much the theme of my monologue this morning coming at 9 o'clock. It might get me cancelled good. David in Worcestershire. Benedict, the Tories are not centre-right. Stop saying they are. Wake up. What policy have they come out with in the last 14 years, which is right of centre? Liberal wets. That's why they are where they are. They are doomed. And Lisa in Northern Ireland. Good morning, Lisa. So many viewers and listeners in Northern Ireland. Top of the morning to each and every one of you. Lisa says, good morning, Mark. Graham Stringer is a possibility to go to reform. He's always been a straight talker. An absolutely excellent Labour figure. I totally agree with you. And Zoe, good morning, Mark. I don't care who comes across to reform. It's the leader and policies that make a party, not always the candidates, meaning they do, as Nigel says, or they get the hell out. I'll get to more of your thoughts on that shortly. I will say it's a little awkward because Robert Jenrick and Nigel Farage have said some pretty nasty things about each other back in the day. This is Robert Jenrick discussing Nigel.
I don't think Nigel is the bloke that you want to have running your kids' schools or running your local hospital, or as the public finances continue to collapse under Rachel Reeves, trust your savings, your pension, your small business too.
Meanwhile, here's Nigel on his new bestie, Robert Jenrick.
Robert Jenrick. Under him, as immigration minister, we got up to 56,000 people who'd crossed the Channel by boat living in hotels. He put more people in hotels than even this Labour government. And here we are, 3 years later, and he turns up and says, I'm on your side. My advice to you would be to say, this man is a fraud. This man is not to be trusted.
So you got two men tearing strips out of each other just a few months ago. Now they're besties. Does this devalue political discourse? Does it make my viewers and listeners think, well, why would we believe any of them?
Well, that's what it does for me, but I'm a deeply cynical person, and I've always wondered, why should I believe any of them? It's one of those things where, yes, people will see and hear this, and they'll think, oh, sounds a little strong, and then when they see the two of them come together, the question is then, was it ever really that sort of animosity? Did it ever really exist? Or are they being mature and coming together?
Well, most damningly, I think. Let me know, folks, what you think, 03444911000, but is there a danger that the messaging to the public is that this is a game?
I think, well, this is part of the problem. And, you know, somebody who wrote in earlier to say, actually, the Tories are the reason why we have reform, in part. But it is more broadly, I think, a dissatisfaction with politics in this country, which is the perception that, you know, we've heard the expression, the uniparty, there is no real difference between anybody, it's all the same. And yes, that a lot of people do treat it as a game. And let me be very clear, yeah, a lot of politicians do. A lot of people working in politics do. A lot of journalists do. They, you know, it's their job, but also it's effectively a continuation of their life at school and at university. Yeah. It's a status game. It's about infighting. It's about briefing. It's about doing one over, you know, getting one over the other. All that sort of thing. All those worst fears are absolutely true about an awful lot of people in politics. But let's also be clear, that's true about a lot of people in Reform who are currently trying to join Reform, and this is something that Reform really needs to guard against. We're talking now about defections from the Conservatives, and everybody going, oh, I'm not sure about this. Do you want to be too much like the Tory party? It's less rats leaving a sinking ship and more the ship of Theseus, you know, just rebuilding the entire thing somewhere else. But, you know, every now and then, those of us who are working in media, working in journalism and in politics, we get wind of certain people who may be defecting. You know, you've been talking about a couple of potential Labour figures, but also people who may be trying to get on the candidates list, maybe wanting to be Reform councillors or Reform MPs. Sometimes, yeah, we're not going to name names here, but sometimes you hear some interesting people who think, okay, good. They're doing what we want them to do, which is they're getting outside of politics. They're getting people who've got experience running businesses, running hospitals, worked in logistics, that sort of thing, worked in the military. But then sometimes also you hear of some people who have worked in the media, who've worked in politics elsewhere, and you think, oh, they're going for influencers. They're going for people who are very good at talking and have got a media presence, but actually have got no experience of running a corner shop. What is going on here? And there, I think, is always going to be the fear that there is that tendency, because Reform, ultimately, it still has to exist in the Westminster ecosystem, that it will get dragged in that same direction that the Tories did, and to a lesser degree that Labour have as well. That's something they need to guard against. They need to be, when it comes to their own candidates, they need to be slightly puritanical. Now, when it comes to deal-making later on down the line to keep Labour out, well, then maybe that's where you might have to sort of muddy your hands slightly and go, we may need to do some sort of tactical agreements with certain Tories in certain areas, maybe open to the idea of, if not a coalition, then some sort of agreement in a minority government. But when you're actually setting out your stall as the insurgent party, the clue is in the name, is going to reform politics, you can't be going for the same people just because they've got a lot of Telegraph or Spectator bylines, or they've got a lot of followers on Twitter. I'm often asked, actually, people, I'm sure you get the same, those of us who are sort of very outspoken in politics or in the media say, why aren't you getting involved in politics? Why aren't you, standing? You'd be great. And you go, what business have I got? I'm a commentator. My job is to sort of sit from the outside and observe. I've never run an office. I've never run a business. I've never run a department. People like us should not be being politicians. That we have no business doing that. You can maybe get 2 or 3 at best, who are good at messaging, and you put in front of the cameras to explain government policies, fine. But when it's actually you're talking about an entire candidates list of people like that, and you're including in that former Tory MPs, that's not good, actually. You need to guard against that sort of thing.
Well, I agree. I mean, if you talk about making an entertaining journalist Prime Minister, I would cite
how did it go? Exactly.
Boris Johnson, who, yes, I mean, what he did, he kept Jeremy Corbyn out of power by winning the 2019 election, for which I think we can all collectively thank him.
Yeah.
He got Brexit across the line. We are out, and a future administration may take the benefit of Brexit and run with it. But apart from that, he folded to Sage over COVID, folded to the environmental lobby over net zero, folded to the Home Office and other government departments with regard to legal immigration. He didn't stop the boats. So, this is not a Conservative Prime Minister in Boris Johnson. Isn't that the point about reform? There's a massive gap in the market for a right-wing government, the like of which we probably haven't had, Benedict, since the 80s.
Oh, I completely agree with that. Reform, as we currently stand, has the opportunity to do something unprecedented, I would say even more so than the 80s, because, I think Margaret Thatcher was still coming from an established Conservative Party. She was revolutionary within it, but it was not an entirely new edifice. And of course she was brought down by the same party that she was trying to revolutionise because it didn't really want to change. Farage has the opportunity for that clean slate, to do something completely new, to actually do what voters cry out for every election in this country. He actually has the chance to give them the things that they want, and to be unashamed and to say, no, it's not right-wing and it's not evil and it's not wicked to want to police your borders and things, basic things that most countries around the world go are completely normal. It's only in our country that Conservatives go, oh, that's a bit grubby, we don't want to do that. He has that rare opportunity. He can't afford to mess it up, because he himself has gone on record and said, look, people like to call me far right, but I'm not, and trust me, if something comes after me because we don't get it done, something could be a lot worse. Absolutely something could come along that's a lot worse. There could be an actual far-right party in this country. Equally, there could be an actual communist party in this country. Look at the direction that the left is currently sliding towards. People like to think that because Britain is quite mild and the people themselves who are here tend to be quite centre and quite moderate, that therefore it could never happen. It could absolutely happen here. Reform has to get this right, because actually it could go in that direction if they don't.
Most definitely. Here is a voice note from Jay on Farage and Jenrick having been critical of each other in the past.
Morning, guys. Great show as always. I just want to say, regarding the Farage, Robert Jenrick arguments in the past and disagreements and tearing shreds out of each other, just remember, when Mr. Trump got back in power, his vice, JD Vance, and him did not get in. JD was very central / to the left. Robert Kennedy, they were more to the left. They didn't agree with Trump. They didn't like him. Trump sat them down, had a chat and said, this is my vision, this is my plan. And they were like, you're nothing like what we thought. Maybe Nigel and Robert have got together over dinner, had a drink, and thought, yeah, this is the way forward. Maybe there's hope for Ben Habib to come back and Rupert Lowe. Yay!
Well, I do think that would certainly bring a lot of disgruntled Reform UK supporters back into the fold if, let's say, Habib and Lowe were to return to the party. I think it's unlikely to happen, but my goodness, that would be a mic drop for Farage and something that perhaps he should reflect on. Steve says, good morning, Mark. This could well be a good move for Reform getting Jenrick. If we want our country to bear any resemblance to the one which we grew up in, then Reform are this nation's last hope. If the younger ones want this dystopian regime, then the Labour Party is for you. Sharon, good morning, Mark and Benedict. I really do not think that it's a good thing for Farage to keep taking the Tories' leftovers. He's going down the wrong route. That is Sharon in Staffordshire. Ermin says, good morning, Mark. I'm of the view that Kemi was correct in removing the whip from Robert and ultimately sacking him from the shadow cabinet. However, where Robert made a mistake was that he did not challenge her for the leadership. If he'd done so and won, he'd have preserved his political reputation and been offered a chance to reform, pardon the pun, the Tory party. Well, do you wonder about that? Is Benedict Spence, Robert Jenrick, the speedboat the Tories could have won, given the fact that it was a contest between him and Kemi Badenoch at the last leadership election?
It would have made it a very interesting thing, actually, and I do think it would have allowed the Tories to potentially steal Reform's thunder. In much the same way as, do you remember, of course, that election that Boris Johnson won, when the Brexit Party were causing real headaches for the Conservatives. And that's partly, of course, why they needed to have Boris Johnson as the leader to try and, so to speak, encroach on that territory. And that was what neutered the Brexit Party first time around. Having Jenrick as leader, I think, could have done that to a degree and would have caused Farage an awful lot of problems. Now I think it makes Farage's life a lot easier, but it also means, because, you know, there are lots of people who've been saying, oh, there are too many Lib Dem influences on the Conservatives, it also means that there are those kind of centrist Tories who would not have voted for reform, but now that Jenrick is gone and Kemi's pretty much certain there, they can perhaps, with more of a clear conscience, vote Conservative and won't have to feel that they have to vote Lib Dem or anything like that. That means, whether a lot of listeners to this show or not like it, there are more likely to be a bigger critical mass of voters voting for right-wing parties at the next election. And I know that the Tories are not particularly popular around here, but still, better the Tories that you're dealing with, if you reform, than not getting a majority and having to contend with a left-wing coalition or even another Labour majority. Is what
now, what on earth is a meme? Well, a meme is like an internet clip, and I've got to say that they've been very creative with yesterday's unexpected press conference, and this is a Jenrick rap courtesy of the Crew Kern Gazette. Take a listen or watch if you're looking on YouTube.
Jack that morning, whipped on clean, suspended fast, headline scene. They said I plotted, secret plan, dinner pre-Christmas, shaking hands. Yeah, I rang for Raj back in September, options open, I remember.
Absolutely hysterical stuff. The bottom line is that politics is all about currency, it's all about relevancy, it's all about being talked about, and my goodness, are we talking about Robert Jenrick this morning?
Absolutely. It's completely wiped anything that the government itself is doing off the front pages. They thought they'd scored a win getting Grok to sort of censor its AI. Now nobody's interested in it.
Forget about it. Yeah. Well, I'm delighted to say that the excellent Benedict joins us the next hour.
It's one of the biggest sporting spectacles on planet Earth, Super Bowl 60, and you could be there. Enter now at talk.tv/win for the chance to score a fantastic 4-day trip for two to the City by the Bay, San Francisco, including tickets to Super Bowl 60 and $2.5 grand in cold hard cash. It's Hail Marys and money. Enter now at talk.tv/win and get set for a gilt-edged trip to the Golden State you'll never forget. For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate, or call 0343-418-7260. Lines close 22nd January 2026, 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus, UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talksport.com. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
It is 3 minutes past 7. I'm Mark Dolan. This is Talk Breakfast. And is this the beginning of the end of the Conservative Party as we know it? As their most high-profile figure, other than their leader, Kemi Badenoch, defects to Reform UK. We'll bring you full reaction to the decision by former Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick to join Nigel Farage. What does it mean for the Tories? Are they a sinking ship? What does it mean for Reform UK? Are they the Tories 2.0? And what does it mean for British democracy? Is Nigel Farage now further away or closer to power? And my question to you this morning is a simple one. Is it now the duty of all true Conservatives to back reform? Meanwhile, Donald Trump receives the Nobel Peace Prize, not from the Nobel Committee, but from the current holder. But has he let down the people of Iran with no further action as this autocratic, theocratic regime kills its own people? Meanwhile, the chief of the West Midlands Police clings on to his job amid an ongoing anti-Semitism row. Does this tell us something about two-tier policing in this country? And mental health is the most common reason that children are now homeschooled. But is it time for our youngsters to toughen up a bit? They need to learn mathematics and English and all the rest of it, bit of history. But should we teach them that life is difficult? Now, my priority for the next 3 hours is to get your opinions on the national radio and television airwaves. My phone number is 03444991000. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222 or leave us a voice note. It is a simple question this morning. Is it the duty of all true Conservatives to back Reform UK? So much to get through. Dolan's dispatch is coming up, plus a couple of Tory grandees. Is their party falling apart? We'll be joined by Mark Francois, live in the studio, one of the founding fathers of Brexit, and Sir Robert Buckland, who is live very shortly indeed, former Lord Chancellor and Justice Secretary. So much to get through, as the saying goes. Let's talk. And let's have a quick look at today's front pages. Daily Express: Jenrick joins Reform with blast at the rotten Tories, but Kemi defiant over sacking, saying bad people are leaving my party. Daily Mirror: would you trust any of them? Farage's party of Tory failures. Newspaper: day of poison and betrayal as UK's right-wing feud deepens. Guardian: sacked Jenrick, defects to Reform with fiery attack on failed Tories. The Times: Jenrick defects to Reform after sacking by Badenoch, and cost of a family drives abortions to a record high. Daily Telegraph: Jenrick, the Tories broke Britain. Shadow Justice Secretary defects to Reform after his sacking by Badenoch. He attacks former colleagues and says they don't have the stomach for change. Farage hails the realignment of centre-right and claims we are on exactly the same page. An appeal for unity from the Daily Mail. Westminster: day of drama. Britain's economy is moribund. Our borders are broken. Our armed forces badly depleted in a world of peril. And our PM is an ocean-going socialist dud. As Jenrick's defection rocks the right, the Daily Mail's message to Reform and the Tories: stop fighting each other and end the Labour nightmare. But here's a question for you. Do Reform need the Tories? Is this a war of the right? Or are Reform already streets ahead? Let's get the views of a former Labour MP who defected to Reform some years ago, broadcaster and entrepreneur Simon Danchuk. Good morning, Simon.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Well, you know how it feels to leave one party and join another. Why did you join Reform UK?
Oh, primarily because the betterment of Britain. We have to get Britain in a better position than what it is, and that's the priority. I think that's Robert Jenrick's priority as well, actually. And many politicians can say that's, you know, what they're focused on. But there's only one game in town, and that's reform. And if we want to change Britain, we have to move on from what's gone before, and that's what my reason was for coming over to reform. No doubt about that.
And do you think that Robert Jenrick's motives are as sincere and principled as yours were?
Yeah, I do think that. I think he's been on something of a journey. This is my observation of his political career. He has been a centrist within the Conservative Party. There's no doubt about that from what he said previously. He was fitting in with the Cameron government, etc., and the ones that came after. But he's been on a journey. He's certainly moved to the centre-right, if that's how you want to describe it. Tough on illegal immigration, all the rest of it. Fantastic communicator, and he's seen the light and come over to reform again, because I think he wants to improve Britain, just as I do, and I think that's really important.
And what do you make of Kemi Badenoch's intervention yesterday morning in firing Jenrick? Was it a masterstroke, or did it just make the defection all the noisier?
That's really interesting. I tried to be fair and objective in commenting on these issues, and I thought she handled it quite well. It was a smart thing to do, to come out beforehand. You're right. I mean, it did move it up. I was having breakfast with an old Labour Party friend of mine in a cafe just round the corner from Parliament when the news broke. We couldn't believe it. We nearly fell off our chairs. He said to me, checking his phone, he said, Jenrick's been sacked, and then whole hell broke loose. I mean, there won't be many other dates like this in British politics. It was high-stakes stuff, thoroughly enjoyable for politicos like me and my friend and others to enjoy. But yeah, it certainly heightened things. I thought she dealt with it quite well, though, if I'm being fair to her. But she's got major problems. She's got a load of Liberal Democrats in the Conservative Party. That's the reality of it. Alicia Keane on the front bench, things like that. And the public can see that, and that's not the solution to what people now want. Then the other problem she's got is the record of the last 14 years where they did government quite poorly. So she's got a major hurdle. You know, the agenda is moving. But I'll tell you, the bigger picture in all of this, Mark, is Starmer and Labour. People are now talking, all of yesterday, all of today, they're talking about what comes next for this government. They've already written off a Labour government 18 months after they've been in power, and they'll remain in power for some time. But everybody is now talking about what comes after Starmer, what comes after Labour, because they've been written off, and they're quite clearly not the solution to the problems that Britain faces. And that's the really big picture coming out of what's happened in the last 24 hours.
We have the tantalising prospect, Simon, of a Labour defection to be announced by Reform UK at a press conference on Tuesday. This has been long heralded, therefore it's likely to be a significant figure. Do you have any idea who it is?
No, like everybody else, I can only guess. I'm just an ordinary Reform Party member, so nobody tells me anything. I could have some guesses. It could be Kate Hoey, who's in the Lords. She was very big on Brexit. It could be Lord Glassman, who's blue Labour and, you know, traditional right-wing Labour. Very similar to my kind of politics. I've always got on very well with Lord Glassman, Morris. He visited me in Rochdale when I was the MP there, and so on and so forth, where he's used to chew the fat. So it could be him. I'd be surprised if it was somebody like Graham Stringer, who's again was a Brexiteer on the right of the party, smart politician, but I'd be surprised if it was him. So no, I don't know, but it could be one of those characters.
Stay with us if you can, Simon. With me in the studio is the leading broadcaster and journalist, Benedict Spence. Benedict, if the defection on Tuesday is not a sitting Labour MP, then the defection is a nothing burger, isn't it?
I think so. I think if it's not somebody who is staking their political reputation, if you like, on what their own constituents has to say, as much as anything else.
And risking their career.
Absolutely. Then I think actually it doesn't carry the same weight. If it's a member of the House of Lords, look, members of the House of Lords they have that sort of security to be able to make that choice and to be able to pontificate in the knowledge that nothing particularly bad is going to happen. If you're an MP, of course, as you say, Mark, you're taking your career into your own hands, but I therefore think that it carries so much more weight. So I think if it's a sitting MP, that's what we're all going to be looking out for. And frankly, I think if it's a member of the House of Lords, it's going to be completely overshadowed by this whole Jenrick affair. Whereas if it is a Labour MP, if anything, I'd say that's of a similar sort of gravitas, even if it's a backbencher.
Well, I agree, and I actually admire Glassman and Hoey, but they are ultimately pundits, and I just don't think it's the slam dunk, the mic drop that perhaps Farage is hoping for. But what do you think about this headline in the Daily Mail today, Simon? Westminster Day of Drama, stop fighting each other and end the Labour nightmare. Are the Mail right to suggest that this war on the political right gifts Labour the next election?
I don't think it does. I think there is a realignment, and it looks like it's coming around reform. You've got centrist politicians like Jake Berry and Nadeem Zahawi, who aren't left-wing, they're not Liberal Democrats, but they weren't on the right of the party either, coming over to reform. And so everybody's coalescing around reform. And as Benedict says there, if it's a Labour MP on Tuesday, it's very big news. It would overshadow what's gone on in the last 24 hours. I'd be surprised if it is, but if it is, it's really impressive. But there is a realignment. I think the Mail's right to call it out. Reform's being strengthened by the day almost, and that's where people are beginning to gather. That's what's being seen as the solution to the major problems that Britain's got. And I repeat the point, people have already written off Labour. They've been given 18 months, they've failed, and the public want to move on to what the solutions are going to be.
The Tories had cut through with Robert Jenrick on board, didn't they? Especially those social media videos with him apprehending people not paying their train fare on the underground. He's wandering around Birmingham talking about, the complete hot mess that city is in terms of its governance and the bin men on strike, all the rest of it. Haven't they just lost their star striker?
Yeah, they really have, and I think they're struggling besides Kemi Badenoch, whose performance has got better at Prime Minister's questions, etc. Who else do they have to front up the Conservative Party? I've been very impressed with Jenrick's communication strategy, really getting some important messages across, showing us how and why Britain is broken, and that's exactly what we need. He has been a wake-up call in politics, so it's a real opportunity for reform. I hope they don't get it wrong and he falls out with Farage at some stage, which is not unusual. Hopefully it'll be a strong team at the head of reform coming up with solutions that will address the problems that Britain's got.
Yes, I mean, I've got to ask you, Benedict, how you think this is going to play out in the months ahead. I mean, Reform UK, only show in town. There was a suggestion that maybe they'd peaked, that they'd lost a bit of momentum, a slight downward correction in the polls. Well, I think Jenrick's arrival will put paid to that.
I think so, and I think this has been the thing, hasn't it? That there's been a sort of a hard ceiling of about a third of the electorate, which is still, pretty significant, that it's sort of crystallised around reform and that's as far as they can go. And to be fair, it may still be as far as they can go. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. I think Jenrick will continue to give them that little bit of buoyancy, that little bit of lustre that perhaps they'd been starting to lose in recent weeks or months. But the curious thing is, actually, if you've taken him out of the Conservatives, you've put him over there in reform, it gives the Tories the opportunity to sort of coalesce around the centre. And, I don't think, I've already said, I don't think that you necessarily have to be in the centre to win an election. I don't think that the Conservatives are going to win the next election, probably won't win the election after that. But it does give them an opportunity to actually occupy that sort of moderate centre ground that right now, obviously, Reform are not on. They are further to the right. But also that the Labour Party are very quickly busy evacuating because, of course, they're terrified of their own shadow. They're busy jacking up taxes for absolutely everything that they can possibly do. They're scared of, what it is that the Greens, of all people, actually offer as an alternative out on the left. Labour is evacuating the centre. It's going further left. The Lib Dems are still not really something that people sort of think too much about. It does bizarrely give the Tories the opportunity to create something new in the centre. And as I said, that's actually positive for people on the right. As much as they may not like the Conservatives, you'd rather have centrist voters voting for an ostensibly Conservative centre-right party than going over to the left and to Labour. So if we're looking ahead to a general election, that's actually a positive thing for Reform. If they end up having to do a deal with a party, you'd rather it was the Conservatives than somebody else.
Jan in Newcastle says, yes, Mark, the Tories should get behind Reform. I feel better about voting Reform now because they have people who have been in government, so know how it works. Irrespective of policies, that's exactly what's wrong with Labour. Not one of them have been in government before, and they look like novices, and their incompetence is there for all to see. And their policies, well, don't get me started, says Jan. I don't think the Tories are... sorry, forgive me, Dale. I don't think Reform are the Tories 2.0, as they have people joining them from all parties. So they have cross-party representation, which is what we need. One party representing all views working together for Britain rather than against each other for themselves. And Tim in Southampton, good morning, Mark. The majority of Reform supporters are ex-Tory voters who feel the Conservatives abandoned them and the centre-right position. There are a number of Tory MPs like David Davis, IDS, even Kemi Badenoch herself, whose beliefs would be better served in Reform. I totally agree with Tim on that one. I think Badenoch, Simon, is a proper, true Conservative. The problem is all the people sat behind her are not.
Yeah, that's the major problem that they've got. I was interested to hear what Benedict said about the opinion polls. I was worried that Reform had hit their high watermark at around 30%. But we have to recall that it's not that long ago. They were in the mid-teens and everybody said, oh, well, they're not going to get beyond that. They're not going to get beyond 20%. But if you've got Jenrick, Labour figures joining Reform and he's building this coalition, then they could well increase their percentage share in the opinion polls. I think there's everything to be watched there. This issue that the elections are won on the centre ground, I think is something of the past. And the problem the Tories have got is that you've got the Lib Dems, the Tories, Labour, all four fighting over that centre ground. But I think the country now, the people in Britain, are really on the centre right. I think there's been a shift over the last few years, and I can understand why, because these governments, the uni-parties as they're often called, have failed to address their concerns. So I think there's been a shift amongst the public, and I think that's the place to be. I think that's where we need to be.
However, not all of my viewers and listeners will be happy with the language of centre-right to describe Reform UK. Isn't the point about Nigel Farage's political project that we want a right-wing government?
Well, Benedict touched upon this point earlier. I mean, the idea that Farage is far right, etc., is just a nonsense. And this is an issue that Labour often get wrong. Labour, Starmer, and others they even tried to paint Boris Johnson as right wing. If you recall, I mean, it's the biggest nonsense ever. I mean, it's far more left wing than I ever was. And doing this, painting Farage as far right is just a nonsense. And it doesn't help the debate around politics, actually.
No, but is the word centre in centre-right a bit of a red flag? Is that not the Lib Demification of Reform UK if you go down that route?
Well, I mean, these are semantics, aren't they? But, it's convenience to use centre-right. It's all about the policies in reality. What are we doing about immigration? What are we doing about benefit cheats? What are we doing about crime and disorder in this country? These are what are we doing about cost of living crisis? These are the core issues. That's what's important. And I do think Farage, over time, will come up with the solutions. He's playing it carefully, I'll give him that. It's carrying the vase across the shiny floor situation, but we'll get there eventually, I think.
I suppose we will. What do you think, Benedict? You get the last word on this. Just in terms of yesterday, what will the political legacy of yesterday be, do you think?
I think it gives Reform longer than simply being the Nigel Farage show, and I think that was always a problem, that there was seen as being a shelf life of the party for as long as Farage was its leader, and after that point a lot of uncertainty. It gives them that ability to look beyond a situation where maybe Nigel Farage decides actually he doesn't want to be leader, maybe he exits stage right, maybe he sits a term as Prime Minister, maybe not, he could last much longer. But I think it gives them a bit more longevity, because it gives them the person that lots of people were looking at and saying could end up having led the Conservative Party for the best part of a decade. I also think it allows Kemi Badenoch to start this year with no rivals, no sort of uncertainty around that. It means that she will live or die by her sword, but also her party will have to back her. There is no plan B.
Briefly, Simon, I will say one thing that's very clear from Nigel Farage. I've been studying his body language for many years now. I know the guy. He's a gentleman, actually, notwithstanding political debates. He's a nice guy, very charismatic, of course. He looked really happy yesterday. This was not procedural. This was not treading water. This was not a continuity moment for the project. He feels like he's got a feather in his cap. He feels like he's landed the big one.
Yeah, absolutely. It turned out to be a good day, didn't it? He was in Scotland earlier talking about launching their campaign for the Scottish elections, and he was a bit hesitant when he was challenged about whether Jenrick was joining him. But by 4:30 yesterday, he's introducing Jenrick as a new significant member of the party. He couldn't have been happier, could he?
Most definitely not. Simon, we're very happy to have you on the show at all times. Please join us again soon. Simon Danczyk is a former Labour MP, now Reform defector, broadcaster, author and entrepreneur. And my thanks to my star studio guest, the brilliant journalist and broadcaster, Benedict Spence. Benedict, do you think you could set your alarm and join us again in the near future?
Yeah, go on then.
There you go. If you can get it up for me, I'll be very flattered. Folks, so much to get through. Is it the duty of all Conservatives to back Reform UK now? This is a voice note from Big Carl. Take it away, Carl.
Hi, Mark. Carl in Bury. It's very simple for me. The Conservative Party is no longer a Conservative Party. If Margaret Thatcher was alive today, she would be a Reform member. She'd be a Reform MP. And I welcome Robert Jenrick because I've been wanting him to come over for months. They're full of Liberals. I don't mind Kemi, but the fact is all the people behind her are basically Liberals. And I can't support that party anymore after 30 years. So from now on, I'll be supporting Reform. Cheers, pal.
Carl, thank you for that. Very interesting. Carl there saying Margaret Thatcher would now be a Reform UK supporter. Is that true? Let me know your thoughts. And is it the duty of all true Conservatives to back Nigel Farage's insurgent political project? We'll discuss that next.
We no longer have a prime minister in any sort of normal sense of the word. We have a spectre. Keir Starmer. He has no plan. He has no strategy.
Are you surprised at how bad it's gone?
I genuinely struggle to align the Keir Starmer we are seeing as prime minister with the Keir Starmer who was leader of the opposition.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
7:28 Talk Breakfast. Lovely to have your company. Mark Dolan with you until 10 a.m. Dolan's Dispatch coming at 9 a.m. My reaction to the defection of Robert Jenrick to Reform UK. This from Mark in Essex. Good morning, Mark. The mistake that Labour and the Tories made was trying to be a broad church. I don't want my party to be a broad church. I want them to coalesce around a set of principles. It's why I've actually got more respect for Corbyn than a lot of politicians, albeit I don't agree with anything he stands for. I believe the true Conservatives need to meld into the Reform Party and the others can join the Lib Dems or Labour. Well, that is the question. Is it the duty of all true Conservatives to back Reform UK? This is a voice note from Steve. Take a listen.
Morning, Mark and Benedict. This is Stephen Hartz. Some of the people that are ringing in and texting in with comments this morning, did they actually watch Robert Jenrick's speech? How can you reform a Tory party that doesn't think it needs reforming? How can you change a Tory party that doesn't believe it did anything wrong? This is the reason that Mr. Jenrick wanted to leave, because the Tory party has moved so far to the left, they're basically Liberal Democrats in blue rosettes. They don't think they did anything wrong in the last 14 years. How on earth are you going to change them? Of course he had to leave.
Well, listen up, was a brilliant voice note. Keep them coming. We need to take a look at this other story, which is absolutely massive. It's been reported that the President of the United States, Donald Trump, was persuaded not to strike Iran on Wednesday night by the last-minute diplomatic efforts of Persian Gulf states and Israel. Now, Donald Trump has, in the last 24 hours, received the Nobel Peace Prize, not from the committee, but from the current holder, the opposition leader in Venezuela. But has Donald Trump let down the people of Iran with no further decisive action at this stage as an autocratic and theocratic regime kills its own people? Let's get the views, if we can, of Errol Moorcoach, who is from Republicans Overseas, and Colonel Simon Diggins, who's a military and defence analyst. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Errol, what is your reaction to the fact that at this point, Donald Trump has metaphorically and literally held fire?
Well, I think it speaks to the restraint that he's promised to show. The speak softly and carry a big stick. When and where to apply it has been in his purview. Obviously, in this situation, he's not willing to cross that line yet. Removing a narco-terrorist like Maduro is far different than removing the Ayatollah, who's part of the clerical elite of Shia Islam. It's much more akin to something along the lines of removing Emperor Hirohito or killing him versus what they did in World War II. So you have a desire not to create a ton of martyrs and a ton of, extrapolated issues from this conflict. So I think that's where the hesitation comes, and we'll see if President Trump continues to hold back.
Do you think that, Mr. Moorcoach, that the president overplayed his hand when he told the people of Iran, help is coming?
I think a little bit. I think that some of it also is gamesmanship. On one hand, he's trying to see how far the Iranian people can push it on their own, and ideally that change comes from within. So if you topple the Ayatollah from within, the optics and the way this works is much different than if it's from the outside. The whole time, obviously, we do have intelligence services who are involved. So just again, it depends how far is Trump willing to go this early in the demonstrations.
Colonel Simon Diggins, welcome to Talk Breakfast. Why do you think the president hesitated in terms of any decisive action in Iran?
Mark, good morning to you, and Ms. Moorcock, good morning to you too as well. I think there are a couple of other issues as well, but I agree what Ms. Moorcock talked about just then. I think one of the things was actually straightforward force protection. I mean, the weapon system of choice for the Iranians is ballistic missiles, and despite the writing down of their air defences and also their nuclear program in June and July with the Israelis, they still have some 3,000 plus ballistic missiles. And they made quite clear that it would not only attack US bases in the region, which would also affected UK forces, but they'd also go after the countries in which we're hosting those. So they go after Qatar, they go after Saudi Arabia. And I think the Americans didn't really have the kind of force protection in place to both launch attacks on Iran itself, and then secondly also then deal with the necessary counterattack that would come their way. So I think that was one of the issues. And I think that the other thing was, and we referred to it in your opening brief, the countries around were concerned of what the fallout was going to be. There is some quite strong evidence that one of the things that's happening in Iran at the moment is some of the kind of vociferous elements of it. The minorities who live within Iran were using this as an occasion to try and split off. And there is a concern, I think, about refugee movement and the country kind of falling apart. So the consequence management of this, as well as, well, what are you going to target? You go after Khomeini, you go after the IRGC, but this is a battle that's going on the streets of Tehran and some 31 other provinces around the place. And it's quite hard to use missiles, rockets, aircraft against a battle that's on the streets. And I think that's the challenge that the Americans have got. I don't think it's off the table, but I think that's the challenge they had.
That's right. Well, you mentioned other Arab states who have discouraged the president from taking any military action: Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman, and even Israel. However, has America, Colonel Diggins, shown weakness at this juncture? And is it harder to believe Donald Trump's words when he says help is coming and then help is not forthcoming?
There's a possibility, elements of that about it. I think that the Iranians are still very wary of Americans. Lots of other things that the Americans can do. They can use cyber to write down the command and control systems the IRGC and Khomeini's government has got, information operations, identify, most importantly of all, a leader in Iran who they can talk to, who might well be able to unite the country afterwards. And I think all that is still ongoing. So I just note that the last revolution, we always talk about the Iranian Revolution taking place in 1979. It actually started in 1978. I think this thing's got a long way to go. And I think the role of America and the role of the West will be part of that too.
Mr. Moore, Coach, there has been some kind of diplomatic, to and fro between the White House and the Iranian regime. Is that a good look for the US president, appearing to cut a deal with these autocrats?
Well, cut a deal or reach an agreement. I mean, at some point, we do have to deal with unsavory characters around the world, and Donald Trump much prefers to deal with the flick of his pen than with the launching of missiles. Regardless, though, I mean, the optics are never good when you're sitting down with people who are as contemptible as some of the people involved in this. With that said, though, Trump's objective here is to protect our national strategic interests and also those of our allies. I mean, people like Turkey or Saudi Arabia or other people in that region. And so while he might have one wish optically, he has a responsibility both in security as well as fiduciarily, as well as just in a human nature standpoint, to do what's best for the people involved. If that means meeting with unsavory people, it means he's going to do that regardless of the optics created.
And Errol, the current holder of the Nobel Peace Prize, has gifted her medal to the president. Is the world a safer place with Donald Trump in the White House?
It's absolutely a safer place, whether that be in Ukraine, whether that be in Israel, whether that be throughout African conflicts or around the world. Donald Trump has shown that he's the man who stands up when the situation gets tough. And while his tactics might not always be upfront and very transparent, I think that is a mark of somebody who's actually getting things done. And I think the world has been proven to be a safer place. And while this isn't the direct way to get a Nobel Prize, it certainly speaks to the respect that the current holder has, and many of us who feel that he is somebody who deserves that prize in the next go-around.
Although, is this not a man who threatens the future of NATO with his designs on Greenland? Doesn't sound very safe to me, Errol.
Well, only if Greenland wasn't owned by a European colonial empire, then perhaps his designs would be a little bit more nefarious. In that case, though, it's about U.S. security and the fact that nobody there is going to be able to control the situation like the Americans. Unless the EU wants to step up, I think we've been made a very good offer, and we will continue to find a good deal, but there will never be a war against NATO for Greenland.
Caroline Leavitt is the president's chief press spokesperson. Here's what she's said about the situation in Iran.
The president and his team have communicated to the Iranian regime that if the killing continues, there will be grave consequences. And the president received a message, as he revealed to all of you and the whole world yesterday, that the killing and the executions will stop. And the president understands today that 800 executions that were scheduled and supposed to take place yesterday were halted. And so the president and his team are closely monitoring this situation, and all options remain on the table for the president.
And finally, Colonel Simon Diggins, this Iranian regime, which is killing its own people, lives to see another day, doesn't it?
Well, temporarily. I hope it goes as quickly as it can. But I think we just have to recognise that they have been in command and control there for some 30-odd years. The IRGC is extraordinarily powerful, 125,000 plus 90-odd thousand Basij, and they're well integrated in society. So I think there's a lot more to play. As I say, the previous Iranian Revolution, 1979, actually started in 1978. I think we've got a lot more to go, and I think they're going to go. It's just a question of time and continuing.
Are we looking, Colonel Diggins, at months or years, do you think, in your estimation?
I would say we're talking about within a year.
Wow, thank you so much for joining us. My thanks to Colonel Simon Diggins, military and defence analyst, and Errol Moorcoach, who is from Republicans Overseas. Gentlemen, a fascinating conversation. Is it the duty of all true Conservatives to back Reform UK? That's next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is 7:40 in the morning, and front page of the Daily Telegraph. Jenrick, Tories broke Britain's Shadow Justice Secretary, defects to reform after being sacked by Badenoch. He attacks former colleagues and says they don't have the stomach for change. Farage hails the realignment of the centre-right and claims we are on exactly the same page. Is it the duty now of all true Conservatives to back Reform UK? Let's get the views of Talk's international editor, Isabel Oakeshott. Good morning, Isabel.
Good morning.
Nigel Farage really looked like the cat that got the cream yesterday. Why is he so happy about this defection, do you think? Why is it more significant than some of the others?
Well, because quite simply, Robert Jenrick was the standard bearer for the right within his former, rapidly diminishing and weakening party. He was really the kind of the last hope of the right within that Conservative parliamentary party, and also for the grassroots Conservatives. Who have they now got left to put their right of centre policy agenda hopes in? There isn't going to be anyone. So it's knocking a huge hole in what was already a pretty shaky edifice. You know, the crumbling edifice of the Tory party now looks more like a smouldering ruin. So it is a huge development, and I think for all of us that are political observers, the implications of this are really only just beginning to sink in. They're pretty seismic.
They most definitely are. Interesting tone struck by the Daily Mail today, Isabel. Stop fighting each other and end the Labour nightmare. Britain's economy is moribund, our borders are broken, our armed forces badly depleted in a world of peril. And our PM is an ocean-going socialist dud. As Jenrick's defection rocks the right, the Daily Mail urges the Reform and the Tories to work together to kiss and to make up. I think that's wide of the mark, isn't it? I'm not sure that Reform UK need the Tories anymore.
I thought it was a strange headline, but absolutely in keeping for a paper that has heavy vested interests in remaining the party of the paper of the Tory party. You know, the Daily Mail has long been the champion of the Conservative Party, and that is quite hard to give up. And so what they're trying to do here is come up with a kind of fudge that allows them to continue in that manner. But the reality is that what Nigel Farage is trying to do is kill the Conservative Party. He's not interested in, as they put it, stopping fighting the Conservative Party. They are two very, very different parties. And if they weren't very different, there wouldn't be any need for reform. You know, reform has evolved because there isn't a true right-wing party in Britain, a credible right-wing political force, or there wasn't before reform evolved out of its previous incarnations as the Brexit Party, and if you go further back, some remnants of UKIP. So that's why it's there. It's not like there's some kind of petty squabbles between people who think roughly the same thing. No, the Tory leadership does not think in the way that Reform thinks, and that is why Jenrick's left it.
What are the criterion by which Conservatives will be recruited into the Reform fold? Because, of course, there is that fear of becoming Tories 2.0.
Well, it certainly wouldn't be for me to lay out the criterion, but I think that, first of all, you've got to be ideologically where Nigel Farage and the Reform Party leadership is. So it's no good if you are, you've been busy campaigning to go back into the EU, or if you've been soft on immigration, that would be obviously a deal breaker. I think the way that Nigel Farage will look at this now is he's got to build a shadow cabinet. That is where this goes next. That's what he said at the press conference yesterday. He said he will be announcing jobs in coming weeks, and he wants to look like the official opposition, which of course Reform isn't. The Conservatives are the official opposition. They may be much diminished, but that is their role. It's Kemi Badenoch who gets to stand up every week in Prime Minister's questions. It's Kemi Badenoch that gets all the privileges that go with being the official leader of the opposition. I don't mean, trappings of power. What I mean is you get access to intelligence, you get special briefings and so on. So they are still the official opposition. Reform currently has 6 MPs. And Nigel Farage is what he's trying to do, whilst killing off the Conservative Party as a whole, he also has to think up how does he build up his parliamentary presence and his credibility as a government in waiting. And that is a big task.
Most definitely. What about the internal politics of Reform UK? You've got some big personalities there, some very ambitious people, including Richard Tice, Zia Youssef, and now Robert Jenrick. Is it going to be rats fighting in a sack?
Well, I certainly hope not. Rats that fight in a sack aren't probably going to get out of that sack and be in charge of the country, are they? I think that it's a big adjustment for everybody in Reform that has been used to being an insurgent party on the outside of things. That is Nigel Farage's whole history. It's been as an outsider in politics to actually potentially being the next government of Great Britain. That is a huge adjustment, and going from a very small operation, cast back 3 years, Reform was only 2 or 3 volunteers around a kitchen table, of which I was sort of one of them. And David Bull and Nigel never left it, even though he was took some time out, as he describes it. He was always still there. And now it's this unbelievably enormous and growing force. And that is a big adjustment for everybody who has been on the long journey.
Nigel Farage has set a May deadline, May the 7th, for defections. Has that move surprised you, Isabel?
It hasn't, because there was a backlash. I think we can all, we saw it on Talk, didn't we, with the callers that we got coming in, saying that they were not too happy about the Nadeem Zahawi thing. There is there's a sense amongst some reform supporters that they really do not want reform to become just a new version of the Tories. And I think Nigel Farage is very sensitive to that. And that has been such a difficult balance as he tries to do what I described, which is build up a credible government in waiting. And to do that, you can't have it purely from outsiders. That's just not going to work, because you do need government experience. I mean, even just becoming an MP is an absolute labyrinthine, Byzantine, extraordinary thing to navigate. So imagine you've got a new reform government, and it's made up of people that have not only never been MPs, they've never, of course, had any experience of dealing with the civil service. So there is an absolute balance there, and I think Nigel recognises it can't just be constant defections of people that aren't actually aligned to reform's values, but just see that they want to hold on to their seats.
If Tuesday's Labour defection, long heralded, is not a sitting Labour MP, that's a nothing burger, isn't it, Isabel?
I actually don't know anything about that defection. I haven't asked the question, and sometimes I prefer not to know, because then no one can say that I've leaked something. I don't know who it is, and Nigel will keep that so tight. He doesn't actually tell people around him, and very wisely so. It's just too easy for this stuff to come out. And if it comes out, it can be totally kibosh.
Is it appropriate for anyone that's been under the Labour banner to join Reform UK?
Well, there are a number of solid Labour MPs in northern seats in particular who are horrified by what's happening to their communities, and privately are quite aligned with some of what, or even most of what, Reform believes. It's not that unnatural an alignment for some of those particular tougher communities in the north.
Isabel, great to see you. We'll catch up very soon. My thanks to Isabel Oakeshott, one of the best connected journalists in the country and Talk's international editor. So much more to come. At 8 a.m, Sir Robert Buckland joins us, former Lord Chancellor and Justice Secretary, and an absolutely significant figure within the Conservative Party, as is Mark Francois, who joins me in the studio. Mark Francois at 9, reacting to today's Dolan's dispatch. So much to get through. Is it the duty of all true Conservatives to back Reform UK? That is the question. 0344 499 1000. More on this next.
Are you saying that you were not aware that Nigel Farage was having conversations with the Shadow Justice Secretary about him defecting to your party? Are you out of the loop, Richard?
The whole point about private is that it is private.
This private is not sharing it with the world or the whole party. You're the deputy leader of the party. You gave your leadership away to get Nigel Farage back. Are you out of the loop?
I've had no discussions with Mr. Jenrick.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Dan in Kent says, good morning, Mark, at 53 minutes past 7. The Tories lost the trust of its members when the MPs alone appointed Sunak as PM. Did they not think that changing the democracy of appointing a leader would make a difference? Don't listen to the core and pay the price. And Stephen in London says, good morning, Mark. I've been a Conservative for just over 47 years. I've only voted Conservative for the last 20 because I had no one else to vote for. I'm delighted now with Reform and Farage and its growing number of Tories like myself. I'm utterly exhausted by what the Conservative Party have become, a cosy band of Lib Dems. I long for Thatcher to return, and the closest I can get is Farage and Reform UK. And Barry says, good morning, Mark. Exciting times in politics again. Good luck to Robert Jenrick. Need to get rid of this government. Get rid of this government. Only thing I can think of is non-compliance from the population. Well, is it the duty of all true Conservatives to now back Reform UK? John is in Crewe. Good morning, John.
Yeah, good morning, Mark. Pleasure to speak to you.
You too, John.
And I have a very unpopular view of this lady that keeps being referred to. It was Margaret Hilda Roberts, better known as Margaret Thatcher. And it's a myth of many of the things about Margaret Thatcher, and I can give you some examples. When she came into power in 1979, there was a need to do many of the things that she did do, and she was successful in controlling the unions that were by that time too powerful.
Yeah.
But many things are never mentioned, and the reason is 1975 was when she took over in the Conservative Party. I would guess in 1975 you were not working for a living. I don't know if you were even born. So
I was a few years old, yeah, 5 or 6 years of age.
Well, you won't remember. When she came in, she was a fan of Jimmy Savile, of course, and pushed for him to get a knighthood. Many of the things then, we had inflation. As soon as she came in, do you know what the bank rate went to after she came in?
Yes, I mean, I think it was around 8 or 9% under the outgoing Labour government, and I think it swelled to, what, sort of 17, 18% at one point?
You're not far off. It was actually 5% in 1979 when she came in.
There you go.
And it went to exactly that, 17%. Inflation was 18%. And she appointed a cabinet full of, I don't think we used some of the words like misogynist in those days, but she appointed a cabinet of all males, nearly all of them public school, mostly from Eton anyway at that time. She didn't do a lot for ladies at that time. Apart from the bank rate, inflation was 18%.
OK, now, John, listen, I hear you, right? I don't think you're a great admirer of Thatcher. I don't think that you appreciate privatisation. I think you take the view that this referencing of Thatcher alienates northern voters in the red wall. So what do you make, notwithstanding your concerns about Thatcher's legacy, John, what do you make of Nigel Farage's reform project and the defection of Jenrick? What does this do to the political scene in this country?
OK, before I answer that, you're totally wrong. I am a great fan of privatisation.
Oh.
I spent my young days, 70 years ago, travelling behind the Iron Curtain, selling Beatles records and jeans.
Wow.
I've seen what communism does, and we have a communist government at the moment. But the problem with Margaret Thatcher, she handed our industry over to the rest of the world. And I worked with the finest generation of my lifetime. They were the people born in the 20s, and she had a vision of everybody should make money, basically manoeuvring money, agencies, things of that nature. She had a downer on factories. It was a dirty word.
Interesting. Well, listen, John, we could talk about this for a long time, and it's very interesting what you got to say. All opinions are welcome on the show. Briefly now, I just want to ask you, therefore, 2026, is it the duty of all true Conservatives to back Reform UK?
Completely. We have an outstanding man in Nigel Farage. Had we followed some of his policies, I wouldn't say we'd be up with Singapore, because we're now losing very fast to the well-run countries in the world. But nevertheless, most of his policies he understands. He understands business, reform, are the only thing that can save this country, in my opinion. And I had a bet on them. I would have made over 20,000 at one time. They were 1,000 to 1.
Imagine that. John, listen, I tell you what, you're 1,000,000 to 1. Really enjoyed that call. Will you call me again soon? The clock's against us. But John says don't reference Thatcher, but absolutely Conservatives should back Reform. This is Jill. Take a listen.
Morning, Mark. Jill from Northampton here. Great show as ever. I wish people would stop referring to things that Nigel has said about Robert Jenrick and vice versa. Goodness me, look at the things Starmer has said about Trump over the years. People can change, people can evolve, people can grow. And if people care to listen to what Nigel said yesterday, he said he has witnessed the growth, the evolvement of Robert Jenrick.
Robert Buckland is next. This is Talk Breakfast.
This journey of me following the migrants went from sort of 10 in the morning, all around the clock, to late at night, to the point where, on buses, on trains, through streets, at every key point, French military police and the French police, they were there. They were on the bus, taking down notes, taking pictures, but not doing anything to deter the migrants or stop them, just being there. I was sat in the tent and he was showing me through photos of his phone, scrolling through. This was barbaric, horrific stuff. Blokes going through walls in vehicles and then jumping out and shooting everyone. His WhatsApp picture was him with a mask on, with a gun like that.
You're in a tent with this guy?
I'm in a tent with this guy, and actually he's just showing me this stuff. I'm just thinking, this is not the kind of bloke you want to be coming to the UK.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Two minutes past 8. Top of the morning to you, I'm Mark Dolan. This is Talk Breakfast. And is this the beginning of the end of the Conservative Party as we know it? As their most high-profile figure, next to the leader, Kemi Badenoch, defects to reform. We'll bring you full reaction to the decision by Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick to join Nigel Farage's insurgent political movement. What does it mean for the Tories? What does it mean for reform? And what does it mean for British democracy? Is the real winner Sir Keir Starmer as figures on the right fight like rats in a sack? And are Reform UK now the natural party of the right? My question to you at 3 minutes past 8 on a Friday morning, is it the duty of all true Conservatives now to back reform? My phone number is 03444991000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Drop us a voice note and, as the saying goes, let's talk. Delighted to say you can listen to us on DAB+, in-app and online. And if you want to watch the show, just head over to YouTube, search Talk, and up we pop. Let's get reaction now to the defection of Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary to Reform UK, in the company of someone that was the actual Justice Secretary, former Lord Chancellor, Sir Robert Buckland KC. Sir Robert, welcome back to the show. Good to see you again, sir.
Hello, Mark. Good to see you.
We didn't see that one coming, did we? Your reaction to yesterday's political drama?
Well, I think we did. And I think that Kemi Badenoch saw it coming and acted very decisively yesterday morning and showed real leadership. Look, this has been talked about, Mark, for months, hasn't it? We've been hearing rumours about Robert Jenrick wanting to go to reform for a long time. And therefore, it comes as no surprise that when he's rumbled, he then steps on a stage with Nigel Farage and trashes the very colleagues who he was praising only a few hours before. It's a very unedifying spectacle. It's not serious. I find the whole thing part of the Westminster farce. And, you know, for the public out there, it's mid-January, you know, it's cold, we're doing our tax returns, we're trying to make ends meet. Is this really the stuff that is going to change politics? I don't think so.
If Kemi Badenoch saw this coming, Sir Robert, why was he in the shadow cabinet?
Well, I think that she needed evidence, didn't she? You know, anecdote and hearsay are one thing, but then to have a letter, smoking gun, if you like, which then the contents of that letter seemed to be entirely what he said yesterday, particularly savaging, you know, former colleagues like Mel Stride and Priti Patel. It was true, wasn't it? It was clearly true. Kemi acted on the correct evidence and showed real decisive leadership. That's the sort of toughness that I like to see. I'm proud of her today for what she's done. And I'm sad that a former colleague, close colleague of mine, Robert, we were in cabinet together, in government together for a long time, has now transmogrified from a Conservative into some sort of pound shop Enoch Powell. It really is an edifying spectacle, and I don't think it does him any favours at all. He's a diminished figure today. Kemi Badenoch is a strengthened figure.
Wow, the gloves are off. Pound shop Enoch Powell. Now, Enoch Powell is a former Conservative politician who was accused of racism, particularly in regard to his rivers of blood speech. Is it not a little harsh laying that at Robert Jenrick's door? All he wants to do is scrap net zero and close the border.
No, some of his language in recent months has been really, really bordering on the incendiary. In fact, incendiary. It doesn't help to talk about places in Britain as being entirely absent when it comes to white people. It doesn't help to divide communities. We know that there are tensions and problems out there. I had to deal with a lot of them when I was in office and come down hard on people who are causing mayhem and terror on our streets. And I'm unapologetically a Christian man who believes in the values of this country. But you don't assert those values by seeking to divide. What you do is to bring the country together. And what I see in reform is a lot of noise and anger and a lot of rhetoric, but none of the solutions that we're going to need to get this country back together. And the Conservatives are absolutely hell-bent on getting those answers, thinking carefully, developing policy, and coming up with mature, sensible policies. You know, the general election, Mark, isn't for another few years, 3 years probably. This needs to be time in which we make a plan. You know, we just elected a bunch of politicians who had no plan for this country, the Labour government, and we can see the shambles there. Are we really going to elect another bunch of politicians in reform who also have no plan for this country? I very much think not.
Do you interpret some of Robert Jenrick's remarks in the past, particularly in relation to not seeing a white face in certain parts of the Midlands, as racist?
Look, I think it's bordering on that, I'm afraid. I think that how does that help anybody? How does that actually deal with some of the issues in our country? You know, we've got alienation in white working class communities. We've got alienation in other parts of our society. Those are the questions we've got to ask. I agree that trust is at an all-time low when it comes to politics. But I tell you, yesterday's antics don't help restore that trust. When you hear, you know, a leading politician say one thing, you know, about his colleagues on day one and then completely different stuff on day two, what are the public going to make of that? Can you really trust people who are prepared to just, you know, do a complete volte-face and say things that of the opposite to what they were saying only a day or so before?
Now, Sir Robert, I understand your measured response to some of these previous remarks, but if Robert Jenrick says that he's in parts of the Midlands and doesn't see a white face, is that not a reflection on a rapidly changing society that no one voted for? I don't think my viewers and listeners are racist or even anti-immigration, but is it not brave of a politician to point out that society is changing at a rate with which the public are not comfortable?
I don't think it's brave of a politician to just reflect inchoate anger. I think what is brave is to talk about these issues in a way where we come up with solutions. I agree that there are certain parts of this country where we don't have that integrated society that we all believe in. And I think part of that is our fault. I think there's been a vacuum at the top of the British state in so many ways in terms of our assertiveness about our values. And I talk a lot about the Christian values of this country. I'm a person of faith myself, but even if you don't have faith, you know, that is the tradition of this great country, and the rule of law and freedom all come from that Western tradition that is really embedded in that Christian faith. And we should talk about it. Let's be honest about it. And I think you'll find that other faiths will respect that even more, rather than presenting a rather woolly, jelly-like vacuum. You know, sorry to mix my metaphors there, Mark, but you know what I'm saying. A sort of, you know, a completely, you know, flabby exterior, as if we've lost confidence in who we are as a country. I'm deeply proud to be British, deeply proud to be part of a tradition that goes back centuries. I want to assert that because I believe in freedom under the law. Now, if people don't share those values, then frankly, they either should be, and they act in a way that is criminal, they should be dealt with by the courts, or they shouldn't be part of this country. I'm more than happy to have that debate. What I don't like is politicians just reflecting anger and not coming up with any solutions. And I'm afraid that's what I see with Farage and co.
What do you make of Robert Jenrick's shift to the right, Robert? Because, Sir Robert, I know that you know Jenrick well. Is his political journey into the bosom of Reform UK and a more robust right-wing position, is that authentic or is it confected?
Look, I don't have a window into other men's souls, to quote Elizabeth I, but I'm surprised. In fact, I'm amazed to see the journey that Robert's been on. You know, I can remember getting elected in Newark in a by-election with pictures of Ken Clarke on his leaflets. He, in fact, got elected then with the support of other party voters to stop a UKIP candidate who was seen as a very strong challenge in the by-election. It's funny, isn't it, that now 12 years on, we're in a position where he could well very much be in that category as a person who other parties perhaps will not want to vote for. I just find the journey extraordinary. I don't think it's just down to his time in the Home Office. I'm afraid I see personal ambition, particularly in the latter years, his failed leadership bid, his refusal to accept that, his constant talking outside his justice brief. All this was a real headache for Kemi Badenoch. As she rightly said, he's not her problem anymore. It's Nigel Farage's problem now.
However, do you think a key aspect of the current challenges facing the Conservative Party is where they've been positioned within the political spectrum? This is the party, of course, of Margaret Thatcher, who rescued Britain from being the lazy man, the weak man, the sick man of Europe into a global economic, diplomatic and military powerhouse. Aren't Reform UK supporters and the likes of Jenrick just nostalgic for a time when the Conservatives really were conservative? Why do you think that the party appears to have shifted left in so many areas, such as the infiltration of woke ideology in our public institutions, with the NHS calling women chest feeders or birthing humans, with a net zero project that the former Prime Minister Theresa May was told by her Chancellor would cost £1 trillion, a very, very illiberal and rather authoritarian response to the pandemic? You know, why do you think that the party shifted leftwards? Because I think that's why it faces its current challenges.
I don't think that's the correct, with respect, I don't think that's the correct characterisation at all. I think the party shifted leftwards. I don't recall us ever supporting that sort of woke agenda. I mean, I threw Stonewall out of the MOJ when I was in charge. I locked up more dangerous prisoners than my predecessors, and I dealt with terrorists very, very harshly, quite toughly. I think left and right becomes a bit redundant, especially when you look at reform, which, you know, support things like ending the two-child benefit cap, which is massively popular in the country. It talks about the sort of state interventions that, frankly, would make Karl Marx blush. I don't see reform as particularly ideologically right-wing. I think they're a real ragbag and hodgepodge of ideas that are cobbled together that are designed to be populist. That's very different from left and right, Mark. You know, the Tory party has never been defined by the ideologies of left and right. We are a party that is older than any other party in this country. We reflect the common ground of politics and the common sense of the British people. And yes, there are times when that has been departed from, and the party's paid a big price only in 2024 for that. And, you know, that result is something that we are still reflecting on and understanding. And I'm sorry that it came to that pass. But that does not mean that the Conservative Party is over. Far from it. Those people who write off the Tory party do not understand the history of this country. And I think that, therefore, with proper thought, which Kemi Badenoch is providing, and proper leadership, which she's providing, we are rebuilding and we will return. And we have to, because at the moment, the real danger in this country is not just a Labour government that is moving leftward with every heartbeat, but the appalling prospect in a hung parliament of some sort of Labour Green Lib Dem coalition that I think ends the free market, ends any chance that we have of having smaller government, and really would put this country, you know, into the realms of Albania or Venezuela if we're not careful. And I'm not exaggerating. And, you know, for people who say unite the right, I say unite behind a party that genuinely believes in trying to get the tax burden down, genuinely believes in business and enterprise, and genuinely has the solutions and the deep thinking and the plan that we need in order to do this. You know, we elected Labour without a plan. They're a shambles. Reform, really, it's all rhetoric and no plan. Got no time for that anymore. I want my next government to have a plan. And what I see with Kemi and the work she's doing is the germination of a plan. I love things like, you know, ending stamp duty, great policy. We want more of that, please, in order to help convince the British people that we're on their side and that we have earned the right to govern once again.
So, Robert, I understand your comments about this latest incarnation of the Conservative Party. It has its history, the most successful political movement in the history of Western democracy. Kemi Badenoch's been strong at Prime Minister's questions and in her budget response. Some very popular policies as well. an improvement in the polls, but we just have to look at the record in office. And going back to this discussion about, where the Conservatives are calibrated within the political spectrum, and I would just, draw your attention to a few things. An ever-expanding welfare state under the Conservatives. Net zero, the pursuit of which is obviously going to have a big impact on our economy and on industry. The Chinese communist-inspired policy of lockdowns during the pandemic. And of course, the small matter of legal migration of 1 million people in a year. None of these things are Conservative policies.
Well, look, I mean, I can unpack all of that for you, Mark, as quickly as possible. I would say that the reaction to the pandemic was understandable in the context of the time. We didn't know precisely what we were dealing with. I was in cabinet having to make these decisions. Do you think that any of us wanted to do what we did? Of course we didn't. And of course we're criticised in a judge-led inquiry for not locking down early enough. I think that we did everything we could in order to preserve public safety, and particularly, my role in making sure that we didn't have disorder and riots in prisons, was a really important part of that particular policy. I think that on migration, post-COVID, we were always going to see that rebound in terms of the number of people coming into the country. During COVID, very few people came here because of the lockdown restrictions. Then we saw that surge in numbers, students coming in. We still count students in the numbers. I don't know why. I think that's unhelpful and misleading. We had the Ukrainian and Hong Kong schemes are absolutely right. Now we're going to a position where we'll probably see a net reduction in migration in the next few years. Because of tightening up that the last government the Conservative government made on income requirements, and then, frankly, an appalling Labour economic policy that is putting off anybody of any talent from wanting to come here. Of course, we need migration, but we need the right kind of migration. And Conservatives need to focus on making sure that we have high net worth individuals who have something to offer in terms of investment in this country coming here, rather than just relying on cheap labour. And I think, I accept that that was the problem. And I think a lot of people rightly are concerned about that. But, when it comes to benefits, I mean, I was part of a government that imposed so-called austerity, when we introduced the benefit cap, when we, in effect, changed housing policy so that people weren't living in, millionaires' flats on benefits, and that we were reducing the benefit bill. I think COVID has had a long effect upon the way in which government operated. Government definitely became bigger in COVID, a bit like a wartime situation. And I think that a properly thought out Conservative plan to reduce the role and size of government post that pandemic crisis is something that we still need and can still do, if we have an election before the end of 2028-29.
So, Robert, getting messages coming in thick and fast. Gavin Cornwall says he doesn't agree with what you've said. He said, your guest, Robert Buckland, talks about society cohesion. His Tory party has absolutely destroyed the community spirit by letting in so many illegals from so many cultures with values opposed to ours. The Conservatives ruined this country and will never be forgiven. Vote reform. This from Mark, who says, Sir Robert is exactly the reason why Jenrick leaving for reform was the right decision for the country. The Conservatives are Lib Dems now. Don't worry, I'll give you the right to reply. Martin in Lichfield. Good morning, Mark. There you go. The Tories are toast. Sir Robert Buckland, a true Liberal and in denial over the failures of the Tories' past record. Disgusting statement about Robert Jenrick being racist. Talking the truth is not racist, just honest. And last but not least, Amanda. Sir Robert Buckland, I'm afraid, though meaning well, is typical of the Liberal left-leaning figures within today's Conservative Party. So look, a bit of resistance to what you've had to say, Sir Robert. What about issues raised there? For example, illegal immigration. This exploded on the watch of the Conservatives. Why is it a good idea to exit the ECHR now? And why wasn't it a good idea when the Conservatives were in power?
Well, I don't think it is a good idea to exit the ECHR. It's a total red herring. It's not going to solve the issue of how we deal with migration. The whole of Western Europe is facing this wave of migration from people who want to come here because they live in parts of the world which are either war-torn or economic basket cases. Of course they want to come to a place like Britain. We've got the English language, we've got the wonderful culture, and it's an attractive place to come to. Now, I am absolutely yield to nobody in my determination to try and deal with illegal migration. And indeed, when I was in government, we tightened up the law considerably in order to make sure that it became a specific criminal offence, and we had the means in which we could deal with it. But when you shut one door, for example, the Channel Tunnel and lorries, remember the problem we had with that. You open another one, and that's why we got the small boats phenomenon. But any politician who pretends they've got an easy answer to it, is
it snake oil from Kemi Badenoch then to suggest that the exiting the ECHR would somehow stop the boats? Is she being disingenuous and dishonest?
No, look, I think she thought about it. She commissioned a report from my friend Lord Wolfson about it, and they've given it a lot of thought. And I'm not going to criticise Kemi for having come to that view. It took her about a year or so to consider the issue. She genuinely thinks that it's part of the problem. I think that the issue lies elsewhere, and I think the solution is actually an international one. If we can, stop and divert these people from actually coming through Europe and change the refugee convention, that's the real problem here, to redefine what safe countries mean. Because at the moment, people are travelling through dozens of safe countries before they get to Britain, and that just seems to me to be, a convention that is now well out of date. Then I think we can make progress. But, I'll say this to viewers who think I'm some sort of liberal. I joined the Tory party 41 years ago in the middle of the miners' strike because I wanted to support Margaret Thatcher and her Conservative government against Marxist far-left union leaders who wanted to bring down a democratically elected government. I've been out canvassing for the Tories in South Wales, facing all sorts of abuse, and the controversy and the fight has been part of my life. I'm a Tory. I'm not a liberal. I will always be a Tory. And if people don't understand that the Tory party is a broad church that has people who have the best interests of this great country at heart and want to make it greater still, well, go and vote Reform. But if you vote Reform, you're voting for probably a more European style of movement than anything that we're used to in Britain. I find the Reform Party and its approach very un-British in the way that they deal with things. I think the Tory party epitomises the very best of our country, and we have to earn the right again to come back into power. That will be a long road, and I accept that. Humility has to be part of it, and I've always believed as a Christian man that humility has to be part of our politics. I'm seeing very little of that, I'm afraid, from the likes of Robert Jenrick and others who think that they can pull the wool over our eyes and change positions on the toss of a coin.
Sir Robert, a couple of seconds to go. We're so grateful for your time. It's a really interesting conversation. Last but not least, I'm the son of Irish immigrants myself, and I don't think any of my viewers and listeners are anti-immigration. I think the issue is the scale in recent years. So it's a really quick one for you, Sir Robert. Whilst we welcome our multi-ethnic society, is it wrong, would you say, that 1 in 5 Brits were born overseas? Is that too high?
Yeah, I think that there comes a position where if you were born overseas, where do your loyalties lie? If you come to this country and want to be part of this country, wherever you're from, you should owe your loyalty to Britain. And I'm tired of people who want to, fly flags of other countries above our own. The Union flag. Let's fly that proudly. Be British. If you come and choose to be British, then be British. And enjoy your heritage, but remember that you're a British citizen now, and your loyalty is to us, this great country.
Well, I've got to say, Sir Robert, we've thoroughly enjoyed having you on the show. Always a privilege. Great to see you again. I hope you'll join me again in the near future, because it's all about opinions on this show, and it's been very, very good to have yours, given your experience in politics and as a legal professional as well. Sir Robert Buckland Casey, former Lord Chancellor and Justice Secretary, top lawyer as well. Your reaction to the remarks of Sir Robert Buckland, who has suggested and implied that Robert Jenrick's remarks in the past about multiculturalism are borderline racist. Your reaction next.
mean, he was prepared basically to say that he was going to lie to her in order to stay in the shadow cabinet several more weeks, in order to do maximum damage to the Tory party that he's been a member of since he was 16 years of age. Listen, Peter, I normally never ever say who I vote for in leadership elections, but my God, am I grateful that I voted for Kemi Badenoch for the leader of the Conservative Party. Because could you imagine if this man had won?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Is it the duty of true Conservatives to back Reform UK? Neil is in Buckinghamshire, and Neil, I've just interviewed Sir Robert Buckland, who is the former Lord Chancellor and Justice Secretary. What did you make of the interview? He's implied that Robert Jenrick's remarks about multiculturalism are racist, and he said that the Conservatives are right-wing. Your reaction?
I think that's the problem. People like Buckland are the problem. They don't really think they've done anything wrong, and that's why Reform are about. If Conservatives were proper Conservatives, there would be no need for the Reform Party. But we haven't had a Conservative government for God knows how many years. And he's part of the problem.
What do you think? What would you call it? Is it denial, or where do you think the Tories are at? You know, and based upon what Sir Robert has just said there, where do you think he's coming from?
Liberal Democrat. And he can say, as long as he like, I've been in the Tory party for all this time, he is one hell of a Liberal Democrat. You just got to look at his views and what he says. Robert Jenrick is saying stuff that the people out there think. We're not allowed to say immigration's wrong because we get accused of racism. You've got to stand up. He stood up for us, in a sense. You've got to admire the guy. He put his neck on the chopping block.
Well, that's right. Let me give you the context to that, Neil. Stay with me if you can. Robert Jenrick faced a backlash in October 2025 over leaked comments in which he described Birmingham district of Handsworth as one of the worst integrated places he'd visited, as close as I've come to a slum in this country. And he said that he'd not seen another white face during his visit there. Sir Robert suggests that is divisive and racist. What say you, Neil?
No, he's telling the truth. Not being funny, but people like David Lammy, Diane Abbott, they've been saying the opposite about white faces and nothing's said about it. What's the difference?
And, of course, there was Humza Yousaf, the former Scottish First Minister, who had a diatribe online, didn't he, in the Scottish Parliament about how all the people in top jobs were white.
It's easy for people like Buckland to pull out names because they've done nothing about immigration for the last 14 years. And for him to say, oh, we shouldn't leave the EHR, that's what one of the problems is. At least Kemi's saying she will try and do it, but her party will not let her do it if she ever got into power. But she's not going to get into power, so we've got nothing to worry about with that.
I mean, Sir Robert Buckland, by the way, is a top lawyer, and he says that the ECHR is a red herring. Is that not a persuasive argument, Neil?
No, because I don't believe anything the Tories say anymore. They lied to us, just like Labour have. They lied and lied and lied. Boris lied, let's get Brexit done. We've not had a proper Brexit. We've not given it a chance. People like Theresa May, all those people, all Liberals. Boris a Liberal. Cameron a Liberal. They're not Conservatives.
Neil, I really appreciate your call. Will you call me again soon? Have a brilliant day. What an interesting set of remarks you've had to make there. Matthew in Saddleworth. Good morning, Mark. Listening to your show and your guest, Sir Robert Buckland. He's so tin-eared. He's a shining example of why the Tories are now a dead-end party. He's arrogant and in complete denial about the damage the Tories have done to this country. Steve says, good morning, Mark. Never seen or heard Sir Robert before, but from what he's just been saying, his pointers are the problem. I just heard you read out several comments. I agree with them all. As for the Tory party still in the game, let alone to return to government, pull the other one. And Robin Camden. Good morning, Mark. Sir Robert is the exact reason myself and millions of others abandoned the Tories. He's a Conservative in name only. Well, look, I really appreciate having Sir Robert on the show because it's all about opinions. What is yours? 0344 499 1000. Mike Neville is a retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector. And Mike, in a moment, I want to ask you about the West Midlands Police Chief. But I've got to ask you about this as well, because you're a brilliant political commentator. What do you make of the interview I've just had with Robert Buckland, in particular suggesting that the outgoing Tory MP and now Reform UK supporter Robert Jenrick, borderline racist for his recent remarks about the West Midlands? What do you think?
Well, I was sat there shaking my head like many of the viewers and listeners. I mean, what gets me with people like Sir Robert, he talks about being a Christian and humility, and then he has the arrogance of telling us really that he knows best, that we shouldn't talk about things because experts like him, they'll sort it out. And I think he probably did the best political broadcast for the Reform Party you'll see in many a year, because anybody who was even thinking, I might stick with the Conservatives, having listened to that and put their head in their hands, they must be thinking, no way, because these people have learnt nothing. They've learnt nothing at all. They think they did all the right things with the ridiculous lockdowns. They think they did all the right things for immigration. All they do is come out with excuses and tell people like me and you that they're much cleverer than us and they know best. I thought that interview, if I was anything to do with the Conservative Party, I would tell him to keep his mouth shut and never go on the TV again.
What about this suggestion that Robert Jenrick's remarks about life in the Midlands being borderline racist? I'll give you the quote. This was October 2025. And Jenrick described the Birmingham district of Handsworth as one of the worst integrated places he'd visited, as close as I've come to a slum in this country. And he said that he'd not seen another white face during his visit there. Was that remark racist, Mike?
Not at all. It is simply the truth. And the accusation of racism is bandied around to keep our mouth shut. And it's been used for about 3 decades. And thanks to stations like Talk, that has been kicked into touch. We can now discuss these things, and we can tell these technocrat, expert lawyers that they don't know best, that we want our country to be integrated, to be a good place, and we cannot have these ghettos anymore, because they're a breeding ground, not only for breaking up our society, but a breeding ground for terrorism.
Is invoking skin colour, though, not inherently divisive, inherently prejudicial, inherently racist, Mike?
You can't get away from what you see with your eyes, and people see that people are different. And that's one of the characteristics of being different. If everybody in a certain area wore yellow clothes and everybody else wore red, it would stand out. These just exacerbate the difference of the area. If you went into an area and everybody was speaking a different language, you wouldn't feel at home. So all these things just tell us that place is not part of this nation. They are literally cut off. If you go to my hometown, Bolton, and places like that, there are areas which have got mainly white, but some Hindu, maybe black, Jewish people, Chinese, all together. And then there's an area which is completely Muslim, and it is completely cut off. And that is not a good way for society to develop.
Mike, let's get you on to policing, if I can now, after those fascinating remarks in regard to the Jenrick defection. The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has been commenting on the fact that the West Midlands Police Chief Craig Guildford is still in post. It seems like he's reluctant to go, even though he's been caught up in an anti-Semitism row. Here he is, Wes Streeting, Health Secretary, speaking to Times Radio.
Yeah, I'm absolutely shocked that he's still in post. I genuinely thought that having misled Parliament, that having misled the public, and having had one of his own local MPs, the Home Secretary, saying she had lost confidence in him, I honestly thought that anyone with integrity would at that point say, I have to resign. And the fact he hasn't, I really think is a stain on his character that if he doesn't act quickly, he won't be able to remove. So we don't expect people in public service or public life to be perfect or infallible. And we know that people will make mistakes. But you do have to take responsibility for those mistakes. And when you've failed so fundamentally that you've lost the confidence of the community you serve and the people that you report to, it really is time to go. So I hope he does the right thing. I will be horrified if he is still in post by the end of the day.
Are we focusing, Mike Neville, too much on the fate of Craig Guildford? Is this story not redolent of the wider culture of two-tier policing in this country?
I think it does reflect that, and the way that some communities have more power over the police than others. And we saw this where you have a Israeli team flying into the country. There is very little, if any, consultation with the Jewish community, but there's all manner of consultation with various Muslim groups and mosques with all sorts of very questionable imams who've made all sorts of questionable statements about beating wives and homosexuality being a sin and a crime. So this is a problem with the police. The police have engaged in what I call often lazy consultation. They listen to those who shout the loudest rather than listen to a balanced view of different groups to come to an opinion.
Fascinating, isn't it? Do you think that he will survive the day, Craig Guildford?
Well, it's been reported in the Mail just that they think he's going to go today. I mean, he's been clinging on legally because he knows that the only person in the law who can get rid of him is the Police and Crime Commissioner, Simon Foster, in the West Midlands, and he is a dedicated Corbynite. And again, I've just read the Times are saying that this Foster character offered a letter to the Green Lane Mosque saying, if you want to apply for any grants or government money, you can have a sort of free pass from me. So that's he's a Corbynite, Foster. So he's been clinging on to him. And I think the other thing with people like Craig Guildford is they live in a bubble. They'll talk about diversity, but everybody they meet, there's no diversity of thought. They believe all the same things. So they'll all be telling him that he was right in the end. Somebody needs to tell the emperor that his clothes are in fact not made of anything and he's naked and it's time to go.
Mike, great to see you. Have a good Friday. We'll catch up soon. Mike Neville is a retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector. Well, we've got two big questions for you. Are Robert Jenrick's remarks in October of last year about not seeing a white face in a visit to the Midlands, are they racist? That is the view, certainly borderline racist, that is the view of Sir Robert Buckland, former Lord Chancellor and Justice Secretary. So are these remarks racist, and is it the duty of all true Conservatives to back reform now? This is Talk Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a big reaction to my interview with Sir Robert Buckland, former Lord Chancellor and Justice Secretary, who has said that Robert Jenrick has been borderline racist in his remarks about the Midlands at the end of last year, and said that the Conservatives are the true Conservative party of this country and that Reform UK are pretenders to the throne. This from Keith in Oswestry, who says, Mark, Sir Robert Buckland is in total denial, can't see or recognise what the Tories did wrong. Listen, we'll get to more of your feedback on that in just a moment. Someone that was at the surprise, rather hastily assembled press conference to reveal Robert Jenrick as a new Reform UK MP was Kate Ferguson, who is the Sun on Sunday's political editor. Hi, Kate. Well, there was going to be a press conference. It wasn't going to be about this star signing, was it?
Yeah, so we turned up at about 4:30 in Millbank to a press conference by Nigel Farage. He said, well, I was going to host this press conference about a judicial review into the cancellation of local elections. And obviously an important topic, an exciting topic in its way, but we ended up having a much more exciting press conference as they unveiled the thing that we had all been talking about all day and really for months before that, which was the big defection of Robert Jenrick to Reform UK.
Well, indeed so. Who were the clear winners yesterday, would you say? Because look at the key characters. You've got the leader of the Conservatives, Kemi Badenoch, who acted swiftly. She tried to spoil the party by firing him early in the morning. You've got Farage, who's now welcomed a Tory big hitter into the fold. You've got Robert Jenrick, whose political career appears now to be in the ascendancy. Or you could argue you've got Sir Keir Starmer, who's quite happy to see the right divided.
Yeah, I don't want to not give you an answer to a straight answer to a straight question, but the answer is a bit more complicated. So let's take them in turn. Kemi Badenoch was the one that stole those headlines in the morning, finding out about this plot that Robert was going to defect. We discovered that she found out about it just the day before, it looks like in the evening, and by morning she'd made her decision, dispatched him brutally, getting her chief whip to phone him up and fire him down the phone. So Kemi was a winner in terms of her own MPs, shadow cabinet certainly. They all thought she acted powerfully. There were comparisons to Thatcher, there always are in the Tory party, isn't there? But this idea that at last, after years of kind of dithering, dallying, prevaricating, the Conservative Party finally has a kind of a decisive leader who's willing to make tough decisions. So in some ways, it helped her yesterday. But look, let's temper that by the fact that Robert Jenrick is a huge political beast, the most popular member of the shadow cabinet, and she has lost him. So I think we're going to have to see how it comes out in the wash for her. Are members going to follow him out the door? Are activists going to follow him out the door? And will this really put kind of rocket boosters under Reform UK, who've slipped a bit in the polls, but are nonetheless, you know, that big insurgent party waiting in the wings to take over number 10. Very quickly, I saw some people from number 10 yesterday. You know, I think they're happy that we're talking about the psychodrama of the Tory party again. They're pretty relaxed about that. But obviously the PM had some good news yesterday on the domestic front, and that did get a bit blown out of the water by this saga.
Most definitely. And you mentioned that slight slip in the polls on the part of Reform UK. Some suggested that perhaps they peaked towards the end of last year, but the big mo is now back with them again as a result of yesterday's drama.
The momentum, did you say?
Yeah, that's what the Americans call it, isn't it? The big mo.
Sorry.
You'll have to forgive me for using a load of nonsense jargon.
To me, Big Mo is a character in EastEnders. But anyway, yes, exactly. Look, I mean, we can be too clever by half about this, but I think that it's true, isn't it, that Reform UK have burst onto the political scene and they've hoovered up a lot of support by people being very fed up with the other guy, be that Labour, be that Tories. Now Nigel Farage is facing the true work of opposition, the really tricky bit. Number one, how many defectors does he take in? So he's taken in Robert Jenrick this week and other Tory defectors like Nadine Zahawi earlier in the week. Is he just going to look like washed up Tory Party 2.0? He needs to be careful that his faces feel and look fresh enough and are all sort of on the same page, that he's not going to get kind of bring two big rivals into his tent, which might be a bit problematic. He also really, I would urge him, really needs to focus on some policy work. I think if there was one lesson we've learned from Labour's shambolic first 18 months in power, it's that they weren't ready to, they didn't really know what they wanted to do with power once they had it. It was all about winning the election. There was no what comes next. And I really hope that any political party hoping to win the next election is more prepared, because it's crucial for this country and actually long term for their own support base among voters. But yes, we're back all talking about Reform UK. All the Tories are going to be watching the polls intently over the next few days, weeks, months. Is Robert Jenrick the kind of defection that could move the polls and help immediately boost Reform UK? Or is he not a poll mover in the short term, but maybe just going to beef up their front bench team?
Now, Kate, we don't know who the defection will be from Labour on Tuesday of next week. It's my humble view that unless it's a sitting Labour MP, it's a bit of a nothing burger. But that's just my personal view. We don't know who that's going to be. But what about other potential scalps, Tory scalps, that Farage could claim? Are we looking at IDS, David Davis or Suella Braverman to cross the floor next?
Nigel Farage, interestingly, set this sort of deadline yesterday at the press conference. He said, look, if you want to defect to us, come and do it before May 7th, the local elections. So I'm wondering if we're going to see more defections flushed out over the next few weeks and months. I think the number one on everyone's watch list will be Suella Braverman. Clearly, her politics very aligned with Nigel, very close to Robert Jenrick. But she has... and really quite adrift from her party. You know, we don't see her out much in the Conservative Party. She's not close to this leadership. So I would suspect quite kind of emotionally adrift from Kemi and co. But she hasn't gone over yet. You know, the big question there is personalities. Does she want to go and throw her all in with Nigel, Tice and those lot? Is there something holding her back personally or not politically? So I think she must be number one on the watch list. I've had Lord Frost, who former Brexit negotiator, Tory peer, who I think is no longer sitting as a Tory now, sitting as an independent.
Correct, yeah.
I thought he was going to throw his all in with them long ago, to be honest. I would be very surprised if he doesn't eventually go.
Well, that's interesting. Kate, look forward to catching up really soon. Kate Ferguson is the political editor of The Sun on Sunday. A big reaction to my interview with Sir Robert Jenrick. Jeff says, Mark, if it walks like a Lib Dem, talks like a Lib Dem and calls you a racist, it's probably a Lib Dem. Barry's in Slough. Good morning, Barry.
Good morning. Great show, guys. I like it.
Thank you, Barry.
That man was so arrogant. You know, he's upper class, he's this and that, and he was talking down to us. We were going back to the days where you got an iron rod in your hand, walk 3 paces, and in the morning, if your hand hadn't held up, you were guilty.
Yeah. I mean, I will say the interview has gone down very badly. The overall picture that's been painted by viewers and listeners to the show, Barry, is a Tory politician in denial, like much of the party.
Yeah, I got into politics when I was about 14, and I'm 77 now, and I've heard about the Labour and the Tories, and they've still not done nothing. And he was saying, well, leave it to us because we can talk about it. You've been speaking that to me for 60 years, and nothing's changed.
Nothing has changed indeed. Thank you for that, Barry. Call me again soon. Enjoyed your call, young man. Thanks for your kind words about the show. Justin is in the steel city of Sheffield. In just a moment, we'll get to that. By the way, we've got a voice note. We are so busy. I've got a melting switchboard. This is a voice note from Phil on the Conservatives.
Good morning, Mark. I think the time has come for all MPs to stand up and be counted. Show your true colours. Do you back the people of this country? Do you work and represent the people that voted for you? Are you true or are you traitors?
Wow, powerful words from Phil. Justin is in Sheffield. Justin, welcome to Talk Breakfast. Is it the duty of all true Conservatives to now back reform?
No. I've come on a bit of a political journey since COVID.
Yeah.
I used to be like centre ground kind of thing. New Labour, Lib Dem, and then what they did to us during COVID, it just changed me completely, and I became a Reform UK voter. Well, they weren't called Reform UK then, because they were the only party that stood up for personal freedoms. But since then, obviously, the Tories have lost their... there was a guy phoned up earlier and said they were all Lib Dems, and he's right. They have lost all their Lib Dem leaders. They've got Badenoch in charge. She's saying all the right things, e.g. she's going to scrap net zero, etc. And I'm telling you now, and I'll put you a tenner on this, Mark, right? The Tories will be out-polling Reform UK by the next general election. That's my prediction.
Well, that is pretty powerful, isn't it? And why do you think that's going to happen, Justin?
Because I think, well, A, most of the electorate have got a very short memory, right? Although, having said that, I don't think much of what was wrong with the country at the end of the reign of the Tories was actually down to the Tories, or it was stuff beyond their control, right? The electorate have got a short memory, and as I said before, Kemi Badenoch is saying all the right things. The only problem with Kemi Badenoch, I discovered just the other day, was she was not one of the Tories who voted against COVID passports in December 21. She voted in favour of them, which I'm very unhappy about. And funnily enough, I have actually emailed the Tories and said, can you confirm to me that she wouldn't do that if she had the chance to do it again? And if they can't answer that in the right way, I might, in fact, vote Reform UK. But with the exception of that, I think she's doing all right. I think they're doing all right. Anyway, will you take me up on me bet, Mark?
Yeah, go on then. So what are the terms of the bet? Your prediction is what?
My prediction is that the Tories will be out-polling Reform UK in the opinion polls, and they'll get more votes than Reform UK at the next general election.
Well, listen, not that I've got skin in the game, but I'll put a fiver on it that won't happen. And let's have that conversation, Justin. Make sure and call me the day after the election. And I hope you'll call me again before that soon, Justin, because that was an excellent call. Young Christian, where would you like me to go next? It's live radio. But let's get another call. He's the boss. I got to do what I'm told. Kevin's in North Yorkshire. Kevin, is it well, yeah, actually, I want to get your reaction to Sir Robert Buckland's interview with me earlier.
Absolute delusional. I mean, the man actually just absolutely qualified what Robert Jenrick said. He actually said that they had no idea that they'd done wrong, and he proved it. He came on radio and proved what Jenrick said. He then practically called him a racist, agreed with what he said in different words, and then followed it up by saying you need to be honest. Well, Jenrick was honest. He was ended up said exactly what he felt. And he's a conservative. He's just
Kevin, I love your call. The line is terrible. Call me again over the weekend or soon, because I want to get your views on the radio and on the telly. But there was a breaking up situation there, North Yorkshire. Could be the weather, could be the Pennines. Listen, folks, so much more to come. Is it the duty of all true Conservatives to back Reform UK? This is Talk Breakfast. It is 8:54.
Brand new for 2026. It's going to be the only way to start your day. It's the home of common sense. It's where the nation can come to speak about the day's news. It's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. You know who you are. You get up, you graft, you work hard. I'm here for you. We want to hear your side. Promise you one thing. It is where the nation can and will come to talk. The Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show, weekdays from 6 a.m.
I mean, he was prepared basically to say that he was going to lie to her in order to stay in the shadow cabinet several more weeks, in order to do maximum damage to the Tory party that he's been a member of since he was 16 years of age. Listen, Peter, I normally never ever say who I vote for in leadership elections, but my God, am I grateful that I voted for Kemi Badenoch for the leader of the Conservative Party. Because could you imagine if this man had won?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
So much feedback to get through following my interview with Sir Robert Buckland, former Lord Chancellor, former Justice Secretary, who has said that Robert Jenrick's remarks about not seeing a white face on a trip to Birmingham at the end of last year was borderline racist. Joanna in Salisbury says, good morning, Mark. The reform ticker is up this morning, despite people saying that they would pull out. And Chris says, Mark, when the next Tory says we are a broad church of different voices, just tell them that's why nobody goes to church anymore. Suze has messaged the show and says, good morning, Mark. Regarding Jenrick's comments about Birmingham, the truth cannot be racist. It's just the truth. And truth is a stubborn thing. It can't be ignored to suit political correctness. Listen, so many of you are messaging in response to this. It's all about opinions, isn't it? Many of you disagree with the comments of Sir Robert Buckland, but the truth is that it's all about opinions, and we want to keep them coming thick and fast. Richard in Leicester says, Mark, remember, none of this deliberate dismantlement of the country could have happened without paid sponsorship media for the parties. Interesting point there. And Ian says, come on, Mark, pick up on what Kate Ferguson said. Kemi's got the chief whip to sack Jenrick. So Kemi lied. She didn't even have the guts to do it herself. We find out from a throwaway remark that she got the chief whip to do it. And on the phone at that. There you go. Look, we'll get to more of your comments very shortly. Very excited. Mark Francois, one of the founding fathers of Brexit, live in the studio responding to Dolan's dispatch and my first on-air reaction to the defection of Robert Jenrick. You won't want to miss it. Today's Dolan's dispatch might get me cancelled. Good. It's coming up in 2 minutes' time.
This journey of me following the migrants went from sort of 10 in the morning all around the clock to late at night, to the point where, on buses, on trains, through streets, at every key point, French military police and the French police, they were there. They were on the bus, taking down notes, taking pictures, but not doing anything to deter the migrants or stop them, just being there. I was sat in the tent and he was showing me through photos of his phone, scrolling through. This was barbaric, horrific stuff. Blokes going through walls in vehicles and then jumping out and shooting everyone. His WhatsApp picture was him with a mask on, with a gun like that.
You're in a tent with this guy?
I'm in a tent with this guy, and actually he's just showing me this stuff. I'm just thinking, this is not the kind of bloke you want to be coming to the UK.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Top of the morning, I'm Mark Dolan. This is Talk Breakfast. And is this the beginning of the end for the Conservative Party as we know it, as their most high-profile political big hitter alongside leader Kemi Badenoch, Robert Jenrick, defects to Reform UK? What does it mean for the Tories? What does it mean for Reform? What does it mean for British democracy? With the political right fighting like rats in a sack, is this good news for Sir Keir Starmer? Does it risk another Labour government in 2 or 3 years' time? And my question to you this morning is a simple one. Is it the duty of all true Conservatives to now back Reform UK? My number is 03444991000. Text the word TALK and your message to 87222. Send us a voice note. Text the word message and talkTV to us, and we will get your opinions on the radio and on the telly. As the saying goes, now, Mark Francois MP is the Conservative MP and Shadow Defence Minister, some of whom are suggesting could be the next to defect to Reform UK. Well, he's with me in the studio. We'll get his reaction to that in just a moment. But as always, on Talk Breakfast every Friday, Saturday and Sunday, we kick off the 9 hour with Dolan's Dispatch. Why is this happening? Why is a party that didn't exist 6 years ago polling higher than the Tories and Labour, a duopoly of political brands that have dominated British democracy for over a century? Why is this happening? A party ahead in the polls and likely to form the next government. A party whose leader only decided to take charge spontaneously a matter of weeks before the last election, having previously been consuming testicles in the Australian jungle. And why are leading figures from the Conservative Party, including former Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick, joining their ranks? Political ambition, yes, that's got to be a factor, but let's be clear. Every single person in the House of Commons wants to be Prime Minister. Get over it. Politicians are embarrassed. They're ambitious, I should say, embarrassed. They are ambitious. So why would a Conservative leave the Conservatives? Well, because like millions of voters, they want conservatism. It's not complicated. Nigel Farage, in my view, has spotted a gap in the market gifted to him by the Tories. A gap in the market for a political party that will unilaterally close the border. A party that will bring immigration under control, something promised by the Tories, remember, tens of thousands, but not delivered. A party that will pursue the clear economic goal of low taxes, a culture of entrepreneurialism, a business-friendly environment, a haven for investment and a mecca for growth. Nigel Farage has spotted a gap in the market for sensible environmental policies, which involve cleaning up the planet, no problem, but not bankrupting industry and totalling our economy. Net zero, signed up to by the last Conservative government, isn't just fiscal suicide based upon flaky, unproven technology. Look at Germany, who are all in with green renewables. Their economy is on the floor. But it's not just that. Net zero is actually a threat to our national security. Not very Conservative. Nigel Farage has spotted a gap in the market for a country that invests in our military and that will protect our brave veterans from opportunist lawyers. Farage, who's not perfect, by the way, has spotted a gap in the market to tackle wokery in our public institutions, with the Home Office peddling nonsense like white privilege and the NHS peddling nonsense like chest feeders and birthing humans. Farage has spotted a gap in the market to deliver a Conservative government, something that over 14 years the Tories failed to do. Now, over the years, various Conservative, so-called Conservative Prime Ministers, Cameron, May and Johnson, should have pursued the legacy of Margaret Thatcher, their greatest leader since the war. Instead, they've pursued the legacy of Tony Blair. In recent years, the Tories have been continuity New Labour, not the true Conservatives. In my view, the damage is done, the die is cast, and change is coming. So could the last person to leave the Tory party please switch off the lights? 8 minutes past 9, let's get reaction now from a very good friend of mine, Conservative MP and Shadow Defence Minister, Mark Francois. Mark, great to see you this morning.
Good morning.
You are a true Conservative to your core. When are you off to reform?
I'm not. The Conservative Party is my tribe. Down the years, sometimes my tribe has driven me mad. Sometimes my tribe has been unpleasant to me, for instance, during all the Brexit debates. But it's my tribe, and I'm not leaving it. And the lights in the Conservative Party, Mark, your views are well known, but the lights are still on, and they're staying on. Robert Jenrick was a friend of mine. I campaigned for him in the by-election years ago when he was first elected. I campaigned for him to be leader of the Conservative Party. I did my best to persuade other MPs and party members to vote for him. I feel desperately let down by what Robert did yesterday, personally really let down. And it's not just what he did, it's the way that he did it. When he resigned from the cabinet over the Rwanda bill because he thought it wasn't tough enough, and I voted against that bill as well at second reading for the record. I agreed with the plan, I just thought the legislation had weaknesses. And I respected him for doing that. And that's one of the reasons I campaigned for him and voted for him to be leader, because he'd resigned from the cabinet on a point of principle. But that's not what I saw yesterday. Yesterday was an ego trip, sucking up to Nigel on television, and the thing that really got me was the way he abused his party and many of the people he'd worked with for years while he was doing it. He could have done that in a very different way, but he chose not to. He basically viciously attacked the party that he's been a member of and which has given him succor for years. I cannot respect that. It was really unpleasant watching that yesterday from a man I've known and respected for years. Rob, you did it wrong. And I'm sorry, I can't condone what he's done, and I certainly can't condone the way that he did it. And no, the Conservative Party isn't going to roll over. Kemi had no option but to sack him. Now, we're all perfect. I'm sure Kemi's made mistakes. At least she buys her own glasses. And we have a Labour government which is effectively a zombie government. We saw that in the House of Commons when they did their climb down on digital ID. Yet another U-turn.
Like the welfare U-turn as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're well over...
Farmers.
Yes, and by the way, who's campaigned tooth and nail on that? Victoria Atkins. I think it's fair to say that on the family farm tax, the Conservative Party truly led the charge. We led the charge against digital ID. We've led the charge in protecting Northern Ireland veterans. Mark, forgive me, I've been campaigning on that issue for 10 years. Now, if Reform want to help us, all well and good, but don't tell me they're the ones who came up with trying to stick up for people who served on Op Banner. I've been making that argument for a decade.
Claire Coutinho's been great on net zero.
Yes.
But it's all too little too late for my viewers and listeners. That's the problem. I think that Kemi has been a successful leader. She's come of age. She's brilliant on PMQs. She's a true Conservative. I will give you that, which is why she might be over to Nigel at some point.
I very much doubt it.
The issue is that we didn't have this in 14 years of Conservative government, and I've got no doubt that you're as disappointed as most of the viewers and listeners of this show.
No, I don't accept for one moment that it was, sort of 14 wasted years. I'm not going to insult your intelligence and say
no, and that's
we
also
got everything right.
That's right. You're right to say that.
Yeah, but hang on, just 2 or 3 things. So education, everything that Gove did for the academy movement, most of our schools are now a lot better than they were. We've got the 4th highest schools in reading and arithmetic in the world now. That didn't happen by accident. On defence, I think I would have liked to have seen us spend more, but on Ukraine, and whatever you think of Boris, he was the first one out of the traps. He went to Kyiv, he backed Zelensky to the hilt. We've backed the Ukrainians, we've helped to keep them in the game.
The Tories restored the economy, repaired it in 2010. after the global meltdown.
We inherited a country which was bankrupt.
It's not all bad.
No.
This is the party of Margaret Hilda Thatcher who transformed. Britain is still a rich country thanks to Mrs T.
Yes. Look, to your point, Mark, I started knocking on doors for the Conservative Party with a blue rosette in the 1980s under Margaret Thatcher. I learnt my trade canvassing on council estates in Basildon, right, including the one that I grew up on, in a right to buy house that my mother purchased after my father died because Margaret Thatcher gave working class people an opportunity to do that. And when you knocked on a door in the 1980s wearing a blue rosette, it was a very straightforward process. The elector would open the door, they looked at the rosette, and they knew what the offer was. It was strong defences. It was curbing trade union power. It was supporting the police. It was a market economy. It was allowing people to buy their council houses. There was no doubt about what the brand was. Some people liked it and some people didn't. But you knew what you were buying. They knew why you were there, and even more importantly, you knew why you were there. You were on a mission to change your country, and Thatcher changed the world. She helped to win the Cold War with Ronnie Reagan. She helped to spread privatisation around the globe. It wasn't just domestically. You're quite right. I'd say she was our greatest ever peacetime Prime Minister. Churchill was arguably the greatest of the lot. Now, Kemi Badenoch, I've seen her at PMQs growing into that job. She now regularly bests Starmer every week. When you look at what's happening in the Commons, the Labour Party are in disarray. This government is dying on its feet. You see it every Wednesday. If you look across the chamber, Mark, you know, as I'm elected, I have the privilege of being at the match, as it were. If you look across the chamber, there's a small gang of loyalists who sit behind Starmer now. But other than that, he's completely lost the dressing room. You just got to look at the body language. They're sick and tired of him marching them up the hill and marching them down again, making these very controversial announcements. They go out into studios, they defend them, then he does a U-turn and they're left hanging on the barbed wire. And the mood among Labour MPs is filthy. And most people suspect that by the summer there'll be a different Prime Minister. We just don't know who it's going to be. We'd love there to be a general election, but there won't be because Labour MPs, you know, turkeys don't vote for Christmas. So the next best thing is they're cancelling the local elections left, right and centre, particularly where there are Labour councils. Why? Because Labour are now consistently third in the polls. We're often second now, by the way. Labour are consistently third, and in some polls they're now fourth behind the Greens. They're a bit like, you know, brave Sir Robin in Monty Python. Brave Sir Robin ran away. And they're terrified of the electorate. It's absolutely appalling that they should use the excuse of local government reorganisation to take away people's democratic right to vote. They should have a right to vote, and if they like the way that local government's being reorganised, they can vote for that, and if they don't, they can vote against it. They can express their opinion peacefully and democratically. That's what we fought wars for. So the Labour Party are in terrible trouble. They know it. Everyone knows it. The Conservative Party, yeah, the lights are still on. I would argue we're the ones that have forced that U-turn on family farm tax. We're the ones that have forced the U-turn on digital ID. We've already had half a U-turn on Northern Ireland because Labour were proposing to allow Jerry Adams to sue the government. We've got them to drop that. We got them to drop that, the Conservative Party. There's now going to be a crunch vote in the Commons next Wednesday where Labour on something called a remedial order. That means that Labour will allow civil prosecutions to begin again against our veterans. That is outrageous. The Conservative Party will fight that tooth and nail, and if Reform want to join us in the lobbies, they'll be welcome. So we're fighting for Northern Ireland veterans, and I say, forgive me, but I've been doing that for a decade. So if anyone else wants to come and help, they're very welcome. So that's where I think we are. The Tory party is alive and well. We're now second in most polls. We're clawing our way back from a very heavy defeat, but we're still here and we're still fighting on behalf of the British people. Now, people can choose who they want to vote for when there are elections. I hope that they will vote for us. All this talk about deals with reform, well, I can't see there being one at the moment. I think there's too much bad blood. On that, Nigel feels very strongly that we didn't say thank you in 2019 when he stood down his candidates in that election. And Boris therefore won by 80, and Nigel's got a point. There was all this talk about should we have given him a knighthood or should we have given him a peerage. We didn't even give him lunch. We didn't say thank you, and we should have done. And because of that, Nigel and Zia and some others are very angry with us as a party, and I get that. But I don't think that justifies the tone that Robert Jenrick adopted yesterday against his own former colleagues. I was personally really let down by Rob, and I think he's gone about this absolutely the wrong way. When he resigned to the Cabinet on a point of principle over the Rwanda bill, I admired it. What he did yesterday, quite the opposite.
I can hear the emotion in your voice. Do you feel hurt by his behaviour?
Yeah, look, I campaigned for the bloke. I was urging my colleagues and party voluntary members to vote for him. It never occurred to me in a million years that I was campaigning for a guy who was going to defect to another party. So, yeah, if you can hear the emotion in my voice, you're right. I feel personally very, very let down by Robert Jenrick.
Have you messaged him in the last 24 hours?
I'm not going to go into that.
No.
But I've not heard from him. I haven't spoken to him much over the past few months. He's certainly not tried in any way to get me to defect. We've honestly not had any conversation like that. But he drove. He did a long drive from a function over 100 miles away to come to my 60th birthday party last summer. He'd already had a long day, and he drove not quite through the night. He got there about 10:30 in the end, but it was a 60th birthday, and he turned up just as I was saying a few words. That was good of him to do that. But the same bloke who did that, the guy I campaigned for, the guy I eulogised for, yesterday threw it all back in the face of my party.
Is Nigel Farage and his success not a symptom of Conservative failure in office? Because as I mentioned in Dolan's dispatch, this is a party that whose two icons of the 20th century were Winston Churchill and Margaret Thatcher. And my view is that
just like me, Nigel Farage has got no monopoly of Winston Churchill or Maggie Thatcher, for God's sake.
No, but many feel that what I
went out canvassing for Maggie Thatcher for years.
Sure, but what many feel is that the legacy of Thatcher has been junked by the Conservatives, and the legacy of Blair has been perpetuated, whether it's the constitutional, the legal structures of this country, ECHR, Human Rights Act, should have all been torn up by the Tories. And if we just go through it bit by bit, net zero, a thoroughly unconservative, unpragmatic idea. We all want to clean up the planet.
Well, Mark, look,
betting the house on flaky renewables, not conservative. Highest tax burden since the Second World War, not conservative. Illiberal lockdowns rather than the Florida approach, unconservative. Legal net migration of 1 million people, where 1 in 5 were born overseas. No one's against immigration. Very few people are racist in this country, but that number is too high. All on the watch of the Tories. That's why the lights are out and no one's home.
Well, no, as I said, Mark, the lights are still very much on. We're second in the polls. Reform, if you go back 6 months, were regularly polling in the mid-30s, and we were in the mid-teens. Now we're in the high teens, gusting 20. In a few polls we've been on 22 or 23. So let's say we're in the low 20s now. Reform are in the high 20s. They've been in the last couple of months. They've been going backwards in the national polls for various reasons we can go through if you want, and we've been going forwards. So we're now consistently second. Now, I don't accept your rap sheet. I accept we got a number of things wrong, and we didn't do as well on immigration as we should have done, and I'm not going to try and pretend that we did. But it's a new party under new leadership, and we're working really hard. We are the ones who do the hard yards in the House of Commons.
I like Kemi Badenoch. I think she's a true Conservative. I admire you hugely. You're a brave and true Conservative. I think that it's a party that's done infinitely more good than ill in the course of its history. We wouldn't have this great country if it wasn't, in my view, for the Conservatives. I generally see the purpose of public life as the defeat of leftism on every front. I think socialism is a wretched ideology which has been proven through history not to work. The big issue is that record in office, the Boris wave, net zero, wokery in the public institutions, the chest feeders, the ECHR, and a rapidly changing society that my viewers and listeners feel they didn't vote for. And this is the big road hump that you guys have got to get over.
Well, as I say, I believe that we're learning from where we did go wrong. And you mentioned COVID. I did vote for lockdown originally,
but not the second and third.
Well, no, I became a lockdown sceptic as opposed to a Eurosceptic, and I was one of those who was
because you're a true Conservative.
Well, I just thought that the restrictions went on too long.
OK, well, listen, hold fire, because on the line is the former Conservative MP, former Home Office Minister and now Reform UK supporter, Anne Widdecombe. Anne, welcome to the show. Mark Francois in the studio, who's very, very clear that the Conservatives are very robustly Conservative. He doesn't think too much of the Reform UK project.
If the Conservatives were robustly Conservative, you wouldn't have the success that Reform has had. It would just be a fringe party. It is precisely because they are not robust. I mean, the fact is they play catch up the whole time. And right up to the election, they were saying, no, you can't leave ECHR, you can't leave ECHR. We say, yes, you can, and yes, we will. And suddenly Kemi says, oh, yes, we can leave ECHR. Now, that's only one example. But what I do know is this, that for 14 long years, and there's no way it was worse than the current government, but for 14 long years, we had a thoroughly unconservative government. You've picked out some of the things, net zero, the complete manic drive to control climate change, costing citizens for their boilers, for particular cars, etc. We've had a very, very unconservative 14 years. That's in addition to all the muddle and chaos and confusion of May and Truss and all the rest of it. Now, I like Mark Francois. He was always a friend of mine in Parliament. I admire Mark Francois, and he's doing a very good job this morning of defending the indefensible, which is the Conservative record.
Mark, over to you.
Anne, it's good to see you, Anne, and obviously I don't agree with what you've said, but Anne and I have always been friends, still are, I hope. Yep. And we have one great thing in common, is that we were both great friends of Sir David Amess. Now, let's leave aside the party politics for a moment. When I paid tribute to David in the House of Commons after his murder, I said he was quite simply the best bloke I ever knew, and I stand by that. So that is something that Anne and I'm sure, still have in common. But the lights are still on. I think you're going to see them burn more brightly. Never take the electorate for granted. David talked about Anne, he would always say that. David said, Mark, never take the electorate for granted. So we don't know what will happen at a general election more than 3 years from now. If Labour carry on like this, they're clearly not going to win it. I think the public already are desperate to get rid of them. So I don't think Labour will win. The question is, who will, and what will be the colour and shape of that government? And that remains to be seen. But I don't know whether I'll play any part in that government or not. But if I do, it'll be as a Conservative.
Was Anne not the canary in the coal mine when she left the Conservative Party, I believe in 2019, in order to get the Brexit deal done?
Well, I think I kind of talked about that, Mark. Nigel did the right thing, and you could argue that in 2019, when he stood down his candidates in what was then the Brexit Party, you could argue that he put country before party. Now, I happen to know that he got a tremendous amount of abuse within his party when he did that. You know, some people had paid for their literature, it all metaphorically had to go in a skip. So some people were extremely angry with him, and he took a lot of stick. And then what does the Tory party do? We don't say thank you. So if you're him, and I still would call Nigel a friend of mine, you've got a right to be blooming angry, frankly. So, and they still are, even all those years on. But that doesn't mean that, that to me still doesn't justify Robert Jenrick's tone and attitude yesterday.
Very, very briefly, because we know you have to run. And if you could stick around, we'll speak to you after the break. We'll finish this conversation. Just briefly, Robert Buckland, who I know is another good friend of yours, former Justice Secretary, has said that Robert Jenrick's remarks in recent months have been borderline racist. Would you agree with that?
I wouldn't agree with that. But what I would say, Robert Buckland and I did the Oxford Union debate. You know, each year at the start of the term, they have the motion that this House has no confidence in His Majesty's government. We were up against a Labour peer and a Labour MP. We won. When was the last time the Tory party won a confidence vote debate in the Oxford Union? Well, we did, and it was Sir Robert Buckland and I. What did it?
Notwithstanding...
and by the way, while we were debating, the lights were still on.
Lights were still on. Well, the lights are still on with you, and you are a very red-blooded, or blue-blooded, if you like, Conservative, with great, great belief in the Conservative project and the leadership of Kemi Badenoch. That is a message received loud and clear. A message, Mark, that I hope you'll be propounding on the show in the months ahead, because yours is an important voice. My thanks to Mark Francois, Conservative MP, Shadow Defence Minister, and Widdicombe's reaction next.
This is the Political Asylum, current affairs, international news, letting criminals off while sending... Oi! Oi! You shut up! I'm trying to record something.
Stand by for 3 powerhouse hours of breaking news, challenging views. I don't give a flying damn about international law. I think people will viscerally reject this.
We're with you every weekday night, Monday to Friday, 7 until 10 p.m, right here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
9:32 coming up to 9:33. Anne Widdecombe joins us. She is a former Conservative Home Office Minister and now Reform UK supporter. And your reaction to the defection of Robert Jenrick to Reform yesterday?
Well, I'm delighted. People are always saying, and I've heard you yourself say, that, we may have great ideas, but where's the experience in government? How are we going to manage to form a cabinet and all the rest of it? And therefore, it is essential that we attract people into our party who have that experience, who can give it. And without the slightest shadow of doubt, Robert Jenrick is a big beast, and I think he is a good catch.
What does it tell us about the current Conservative Party that the former Justice Secretary, Sir Robert Buckland, has accused Robert Jenrick of borderline racism for his recent remarks about a trip to the Midlands and not seeing a white face on his visit there?
Well, I think it tells you that the Conservative Party still doesn't understand how worried the British people are. And there is nothing borderline racist about observing and commenting on what you observe. A lot, of course, depends on the context. But I don't think that was borderline racism. But quite inevitably, whenever anybody comes to reform, somebody somewhere tries to find something they've said that might indicate that they are very possibly bordering on racism. It is a nonsense.
Does it surprise you that Mark Francois, who is a true Conservative, has offered such a robust defence of the party's stint in office?
No, I think that's what he's got to do. He is, after all, a spokesman. And I would be very surprised if he sat down in front of you and said, yes, it was all a pretty fine mess. But yes, it was all a pretty fine mess. Wokery got the upper hand. The transgender nonsense got the upper hand. Yeah. True conservatism just wasn't there. It wasn't even on their agenda.
Do you think Mark Francois privately agrees with you, Anne?
Well, I've never had a conversation with him that would indicate that he does. Let me make that very clear. But yes, I reckon, he mentioned David Amess. David Amess used to absolutely despair of what the Conservatives were doing and where they were going. And he yearned for the glory days. He yearned for the Thatcher years. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if, privately, Mark Francois has some of the same reservations. But he's doing his duties. He's not going to say that.
However, do you think under the robust leadership of Kemi Badenoch that the Conservatives can gravitate back towards the political right?
Well, I laugh when I hear about robust leadership. As I say, she plays catch-up with Reform the whole time. That's not what I call leadership. Her performance at the dispatch box has undeniably improved, but the fact is that William Hague used to beat Tony Blair week after week at Prime Minister's questions, had no resonance with the greater public. All they're concerned about is what they can see, how far their money will stretch, if their jobs are secure, if their children's education is reliable, if they can get treatment when they go to the NHS. That is what they're concerned about. They're not concerned about Westminster Village. And frankly, yes, I think Kemi has improved, but it was from a very, very low base.
Stay with us, Anne. Stuart is in Somerset. Stuart, you're on Talk, and you have the ear of Anne Widdecombe, former Government Home Office Minister. What do you make of this political drama, Stuart?
Well, as I said to your colleague a few moments ago, I am 60 years old. I have been a lifelong Conservative. I believe in Conservative principles, Conservative values, and as a matter of fact, I genuinely like Mark Francois. I think he's a very genuine Conservative, but he is outnumbered, and he can sit on your show and sugarcoat their past record and what they should have done and what they could have done, but he is very much a fish out of water. He would be a wonderful, wonderful Reform MP. Yeah. Clearly, he's made it quite clear he's got no intention of leaving the Conservative Party. I would say, as a lifelong Conservative, there is no chance whatsoever of me ever voting Conservative, because they're not a Conservative Party, they're a bunch of neoliberal wets, and that is not acceptable.
Stuart, thank you for a brilliant call. And your reaction?
My reaction to that is Stuart has said it all wonderfully in a nutshell. They're a bunch of neoliberal wets, and that is quite true. That is what we have, and that is why when people say to me, oh, but the Tories and Reform should get together, I say, hang on, just look at the Tory party. It's stuffed full of wets and woke and Remain and all the rest of it. And, that would just drag us down. We are speaking for the people of Britain, and as long as we do that, I think we will win the next election.
Malcolm is in Oxford. Malcolm, you are live with Anne Widdecombe.
Good morning, Mark. Good morning, Anne.
Hello, Malcolm.
Good morning.
Fantastic MP, a fantastic Reform member as well. Mark Francois, I've got a great regard for that man. However, this morning, he seems to have forgot that 14 years, that party let us down. And they had their biggest defeat at the last general election. There's a reason for that. Mark, yourself, you keep saying the rights are fighting like dogs in a sack. They're not fighting like dogs in a sack at all. You've got two different parties. You've got the Reform Party, which is on the right, and you've got the Tory Party, which is slightly left of centre.
Yeah.
Keir Starmer coming on to she should have sacked him earlier. Blah. What's he going to do about Keir's wet streeting? Wet streeting is manoeuvring to become the Prime Minister. What's going on? Don't gaslight the British public. And Reform with Nigel Jenrick, they are not gaslighting us. They are telling us as it is. We're not stupid.
Malcolm, thank you for a brilliant call. I'll let you get the dogs out for a walk. They sound a little testy. Anne Widdecombe, how much trouble do you think are the Tories in?
Oh, I think they're in deep, deep trouble. That was not the last defection that we'll see. I don't even think it's the last high-profile defection that we'll see. They're in deep trouble because they haven't got a coherent Tory philosophy, as Thatcher had, as Mark Francois has. They haven't got that. They bow to the wind. And that is why, for example, they've changed their position on ECHR. Oh, well, Reform is saying it's possible and the public like it, so we'll go along with that. After 14 years of saying it was impossible. So I don't think that the public are going to be won round anytime soon. I do think that the Labour Party is in dire trouble, real trouble. But having said that, the normal reaction to that in the past would have been, okay, we'll get the Tories. But not now, because after 14 years, nobody wants the Tories.
Jenny has messaged the show saying that actually what Kemi said about Jenrick's behaviour doesn't quite add up, and that she's not convinced by the Leader of the Opposition story in relation to how much she did or didn't know. And this from Brad in Cambridge, Anne. Good morning, Mark. I'm an ex-member of the Conservative Party, now a member of Reform. I like Robert Jenrick, and I'm sure he'll be good for Reform. But, like Mark Francois, I was disappointed with the way he disrespected his former colleagues yesterday. It did him no credit at all. Do you think that Brad is right there, Anne, that Robert Jenrick went too far in singling out the likes of Mel Stride and Priti Patel in a very personal way?
Well, I think his what he got wrong was to actually name them as such. He could have said, you've got a chancellor who believes this and a foreign secretary who believes that. He could have said any of those things. I personally wouldn't have done it that way, but on the other hand, he is very blunt and straight talking, and that was what he decided to do.
And briefly, if you can, the Daily Mail, I think that they're actually a little off kilter with their front page headline. Stop fighting each other and end the Labour nightmare. It seems they're attached to this narrative that somehow the Tories and Reform UK cancel each other out and gift power to Labour. I'm not sure that's true anymore.
Well, of course it's not. If you actually look at what polls are doing, we are consistently ahead, and not just by a whisker. We're ahead by a very long way, and it is consistent. I mean, that is the crucial thing. It's not up and down. And the Tories are not trusted by the public, and quite rightly. And as I said earlier, my main objection to trying to get together with the Tories is that they've still got this enormous, what one of your callers described as neoliberal wet rump, and they have what they've got. And so long as they've got that, I don't want reform anywhere near them.
Anne, you don't have a neoliberal bone in your body. It's always a thrill to have you on the show. We're very old friends. I'm a great fan of yours, and I'm really pleased to see you in such rude health again, because I know you had a little bit of an untoward moment there, a little accident, but I'm glad that you're fighting fit, and we'll have many on-air adventures throughout 2026. Have a great day, Anne, and we'll catch up soon. Anne Widdecombe, former Conservative Home Office Minister, now, of course, Reform UK supporter. This is a voice note from James.
Morning, Mark. Just another comment on Sir Robert there. He exemplifies what a politician in today's day and age is, doesn't he, really? He said a lot of words, answered no questions, filibustered, and ultimately didn't come to any real revelations for the people. You know, you asked him about the is 1 in 5 people in the UK being a foreign-born nationality too much? And he didn't say yes, he didn't say no. Oh, no, well, I say if you come here, you've got to fly. Stop waffling. We have listened to your waffle for 14 years. We are tired. We, the collective we of the United Kingdom, are tired. We are tired of working 60 hours a week. We are tired of grafting our backsides off for very little. And then when we have the audacity to say we're fed up with the way you're running the country, we get labelled as far right, extreme this, extreme that. We are done. We are fed up. No more. This is the line in the sand.
There you go. And last word goes to Ben on a voice note. Take it away, Ben.
Morning, Mark. Ben from Frimley here. I'll take Justin's bet from Sheffield that the Tories will win the next general election, and I'll actually eat my hat if the Reform don't win with a landslide. The public are sick of being lied to, first over Brexit, then over immigration, and then Labour just lie on a daily basis. Great show, mate. Have a good day.
Ben, thank you for your kind words. So much more to come. Is it the duty of all true Conservatives to now back Reform UK? This is Talk Breakfast.
From here on in, it's going to be a really interesting ride because, I mean, the challenge Reform will have is having those two great big personalities, those two great big political animals, Jenrick and Farage, in the same space, mainly because they're the same kind of politician. They're street campaigners. They trade on charisma. They are there. They're in your face. Now, I wonder how they're going to get on together.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Talk Breakfast 9:48. Mark Dolan with you every Friday, Saturday and Sunday throughout 2026. Dolan's Dispatch at 9 o'clock every single day. And I'm delighted to say big opinions, big guests and your feedback. Let's take a call from Nico in London. Good morning, Nico.
Hi, Mark. I'm really enjoying the show today, and particularly your long-form responses with Mark Francois and others to Jenrick's defection. I like Mark Francois, but I have to say, when he said we led the charge on digital ID, it just made me realise the Tories do nothing in the world, in the community, on the ground when it comes to everyday issues like digital ID and the inheritance tax for farmers and so on. They think they're posing things in the House of Commons. Often they do a pretty bad job of that. Even Kemi Badenoch, I have to say, I don't think does a great job at the dispatch box, MQs and so on. And I think the Tories, they think that we just have to wait till the next election, till all the issues that are, stressing us get resolved. They could be out there campaigning, like the Together Declaration that I'm a member of does. That led the charge against digital ID, not Robert Jenrick, not Mark Francois and the Tories.
And they led the charge against the ruinous lockdowns, which in my view,
Indeed.
Nico, were very unconservative.
Indeed. I've never... it used to be the case that you'd find politicians, to be fair, more on the left than the right, actually getting out there and leading campaigns in the community, on the ground, trying to win people's hearts and minds, and actually acting like a party that doesn't see Parliament as being the only place that change gets made, which it's not. We know that the rollbacks that Labour's done on the farmers and so on has been because farmers have been going to Whitehall in their tractors and so on and protesting, and Together have been supporting that. Whoever started the petition that got 3 million signatures against digital ID, they did more than the Tories did to oppose it. Andrew Orlowski, a journalist colleague of mine,
I know him at the Telegraph.
Yeah, and he's done a great job of exposing why digital ID is, both iniquitous and won't work and so on. So I think I can't see the Tories succeeding unless they change their mindset from just being, we're going to sit in Parliament and we're going to try and form the next government in 2029 or whatever. Well, we out here just have to suffer with the iniquities of what the current government
very briefly, Nico, I think that Kemi Badenoch's an impressive lady, and I think she actually is a true Conservative to her core. The problem is, it's not her, is it? It's the people sat behind her on those backbenches who are, many of them, on the left politically.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Mark Francois is complacent about the fact that you need, a bit like Boris Johnson did during the Brexit wars. If the Tories are going to ever have a chance of forming a competent alternative, they have to purge all the people who are essentially Lib Dems and some even better than the Labour Party, to be honest.
And Thatcher did it, Nico, in the 80s. Thatcher had to get the wets out.
That's true. Yeah, it didn't actually expel any MPs per se, but
she marginalised them, and what she did is she got them out of those front bench positions. She got them out of government and onto the back benches so they could stew in their own juice. People like Edward Heath.
Yes, yeah, and I accept the idea that political parties are to an extent coalitions. That's why we don't have proportional representation, because the coalitions are formed in advance rather than afterwards. But the Tory party is not. It doesn't have an ideology, and I'm not saying you have to have a strong ideology all the time, but nothing coheres it politically. Even the idea of freedom doesn't cohere the Tory party politically, and you can see that during lockdown. They never mentioned the idea of freedom once. What's the price of our freedom that we're giving up in order to, supposedly combat the virus. They never talked about that. They don't have any principles as far as I
Nico, I totally agree. The Conservative response to COVID would have been Florida, Ron DeSantis, Sweden, Texas, you name it. Plenty of examples. Nico, I wish we had longer. Please call me again soon. Very much enjoyed your input. Loved all of the calls today and the voice notes. Next up, time now to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning the trip of a lifetime to San Francisco, USA. Talk is giving away flights, a 3-night stay at a 4-star intercontinental hotel, and £2,500 worth of spending money, plus tickets to the Super Bowl to top it all off. Take a listen to find out how you can enter.
For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or call 0343-418-7260. Lines close 22nd January 2026, 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus, UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at TalkSport.com. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
Removal vans seen at the Royal Lodge. Is Prince Andrew finally leaving the Windsor estate? Let's get the views of the esteemed royal biographer and broadcaster Angela Levin. Angela, lovely to see you again.
Hello, nice to be here.
Well,
Thank
it's
you.
Great to have you. Happy New Year. Politics has dominated our conversation this morning, but we need to talk about the royal family. And Andrew, is he on the move?
Yes, it seems to be that he's going to get out before his birthday, which is on February the 19th. So that's going to be really quick. There's a lot of people working very hard at Marsh Farm, which is where he's going to, if it's ready. If not, King Charles is going to let him have a place near there in Sandringham, but he'd just have to wait. But I think now perhaps Andrew said, look, I've had enough, let me out of this room. I don't want to be in this place anymore in Royal Lodge. He was there for 2 decades and never really did any reparation of it. So he'd probably be quite keen to get out of it. And so he's there, he will be, and they're doing all sorts of things, very high wooden things that you can't actually see where he is, and making sure that he is safe. Lots of electrical things that are going to protect him if there's any problems. But this new place will have 5 bedrooms, 2 reception rooms and a kitchen. Now you compare that with 30 rooms in Royal Lodge. It's going to be a big change. But he also he's insisting on having staff, chefs, housekeeper, gardeners, all that. He's not going to actually work very hard for himself. He's not done anything like that in his entire life, I think. So they're going to keep up with that. And I think he'll be quite comfortable with it. He might be a bit miserable, but I think he's not a sort of emotional man, is he? He doesn't notice when he should do something and make things easier for people. He just does what he feels like. So I think he'll carry on like that. And we'll see. But it's quite a quick change now. At the beginning of this year, it was Zoom, lots of people there to sort of sort things out.
He's got away with murder, hasn't he, given the fact that he's brought the royal family into disrepute with his friendship with disgraced ex-dead paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. This is a guy, Angela, that won't have to pay a bill for the rest of his life as he lives in the very secure compound of the Sandringham estate.
I think it's all to shut him up, really. I mean, the Queen adored him. He was her favourite son, and he's never really had to think for himself about things. And he's not exactly a very nice man for anyone. And poor old Sarah is desperately unhappy, in a very bad state. Not that I feel poor her, because she was actually behaving badly as well, but it's the end of a very long relationship. And the children, Beatrice and Eugenie, are not actually being so nice to them. Usually they've been very close, but they don't want to get in anywhere near what their father's done or talked about. And so they're keeping more towards the crown than they are towards the family, which is very unusual for them.
Sarah and Andrew cohabited at the Royal Lodge for, I think, in excess of 2 decades. What does this move to Sandringham mean for their relationship / friendship, Angela?
I think it'll be mostly gone. I mean, she wants to go abroad. She doesn't want to stay with. I think one of the girls invited her to stay with them, live with them, and she doesn't want to do that. I don't think she wants to be looking after children. She wants to do things, and she hopes that she can get this huge interview where she will be paid vast amounts of money, and that will help her. And she wants to write a book, but I think most people don't really want to read something like that, and the publisher might not do it. But the interview, I think, could be very dangerous for everyone. And then she wants to go abroad, so she wants to have a new life. But I don't think it'll be a very happy one.
Andrew and Sarah Ferguson, a pair of shameless grifters. Unlike Angela Levin, who's one of the finest journalists in the country and a brilliant royal biographer. Angela, I wish we had longer, but cannot wait to have so many interviews in the course of 2026 in your good company. A true legend of Fleet Street, Angela Levin, who, by the way, knows the royals better than they know themselves. Someone that has a penetrating political vision and an unnatural broadcasting gift is Duncan Barks, who's live at 10.
Morning.
Morning, big man. Listen, great work over Christmas. I was
Very
glued.
kind of you.
And it's great to have you back. Listen, where do you start? I mean,
Where do you start?
You know, sometimes you get the quiet news day.
Yeah, yeah.
Today, not so much.
Yeah, I have been glued